an innocent victim of her spouse's perverse passion. They say that an adult is simply impossible to re-educate because it is a formed personality with its views, way of thinking, preferences, character, and temperament. However, some women are sure that patience and pedagogical talent can work wonders. More experienced women realize that it is important from the very beginning to consider the man who is next to her, to study his shortcomings, and to understand whether she can live together with them, because falling in love and passion will pass, and the negative qualities with age will only worsen. If it is not about some minor shortcomings, but about real problems, such as addictions, pathological tendency to lie and violence and so on, it is better to run away from such a person without looking back. But in women, often in such cases, manifests the rescuer syndrome, an acute desire and irrepressible desire to help at the cost of their own well-being. It is this syndrome ruined a young British woman named Vicky Roberts, who almost 3 years struggling for her love, trying to re-educate her cheating husband with sadistic tendencies. Unfortunately for the girl, all her efforts turned out only pain, humiliation, and cruelty. Vicky and Michael Roberts. Vicky Roberts, born Victoria Smith, was born in September 1984 in the county of Cheshire, in the northwest of England. She was the younger of 2 daughters in a rather conservative and deeply religious family. Together with her sister, she attended a Christian school and also practiced music and sang in the choir. People around her described her as a very kind, friendly, and helpful girl, always ready to help others. After graduating from high school, Vicky went to university and at the same time got a job in one of the stores of the chain IKEA to pay for her own education. It was there that the girl soon met a young man named Michael Roberts, with whom she first started a friendly relationship. The new acquaintance was only a year older than Vicky. He also got a job at IKEA in parallel with his studies, and he also played sports, carefully watched himself, and was able to make a pleasant impression on others. At first, the sociable and charismatic Michael seemed too talkative and overly intrusive to the modest Vicky, but he quickly managed to gain her attention and favor. It is worth saying a few words about Michael and his family. He was born in June 1983 in Warrington, Cheshire, and was the eldest of 2 sons in the family of a prominent chemical engineer. Parents brought up their children in strictness, and high expectations always laid on the eldest heir, who studied well at school, grew up ambitious, purposeful, and able to achieve what they wanted. The guy always had a lot of friends. He could easily become the soul of any company, but most of all, he was proud of his victories on the love front. Michael had a bright and attractive appearance, was tall, trim, with a good sense of humor, and the ability to show himself at his best. To everything else, this handsome man was also very intelligent, well-read, could easily support a conversation on any topic. Parents from childhood indoctrinated the eldest heir that he is the best, the most beautiful, intelligent, and will certainly succeed. All this probably provoked in the guy narcissistic disorder, which with age progressed. At the same time, Michael was always very afraid to upset his dad and mom, and therefore did everything to be the perfect son for them, and meet all their expectations. Roberts never had a permanent girlfriend. He regularly changed girlfriends and mistresses, could spin several novels in parallel, so that none of his passions did not realize that she was not the only one. The guy was confident in his irresistibility, could find an approach to any girl, and he really liked to conquer unavailable girls. This process he perceived as a kind of game or competition. Just such a modest and inaccessible girl was Vicky, which Michael decided by all means to conquer. At first, she stubbornly kept her distance and refused even innocent offers to walk after work or drink coffee somewhere. Smith spent almost all her time studying, and on weekends she went to church, so she didn't even think about dating, let alone any relationship. It took Michael a few months for Vicky to finally agree to go out with him. He was sweet, charming, touchingly courted her, gave her flowers, gifts, and little surprises. He even invited her to a family dinner at his parents' house, who liked Vicky very much and immediately approved of their son's choice. Vicky believed he was serious and gave in. He became her first man and remained the only one. She was truly happy around him, and it seemed like fate to her. Michael also seemed to fall in love and was ready to settle down, but it didn't last long. 50 Shades of Michael. From the outside, their romance seemed perfect. They were both young, attractive, full of energy, ambition, and made huge plans for the future. But soon Vicky realized that her chosen one has one peculiarity, namely, an irrepressible sexual appetite and passion for experimentation in bed. At first, he did not put too much pressure on his chosen one in this regard, fearing that Vicky would leave him. But as soon as the guy realized that she would not go anywhere from him, he, as they say, opened the cards. The modest and religious girl was literally shocked by what was happening, but she was head over heels in love with Michael, and therefore trusted him, and for a long time did not tell anyone about what was happening in their bedroom behind closed doors. In addition, her lover made her an official marriage proposal, which she gladly accepted, sincerely believing that after the wedding everything will change and the chosen one will stop his experiments. Soon, one of Vicky's closest friends began to notice that she carefully disguises and hides bruises and small bruises under her clothes. She brought Smith into a frank conversation and asked if her fiancé was beating her and if she needed help. Vicky tried to deny everything, but then still admitted that all these marks are the consequences of intimate experiments Michael, who had a special passion for binding, the use of various toys and devices. She also secretly told her friend that they have with the chosen intimacy happens up to 5 times a day, while he still remains hungry and unsatisfied. Michael considered himself a skillful lover, and intimacy for him was a kind of art and a way of self-expression. Sometimes he made concessions when Vicky refused to participate in some completely crazy and even dangerous experiments, but in most cases, he still managed to persuade the girl in love with him. Unplanned pregnancy. After defending her diploma, Vicky decided to change jobs and was soon hired as an account manager at a logistics company. Michael also quit IKEA and got a job as a sales consultant in one of the stores of a large retail chain, selling phones, laptops, and other electronics. He almost immediately became one of the best employees because thanks to his charisma, communication, and persuasive skills, he always exceeded sales targets. Soon, the new young employee was promoted to senior salesman, and the management seriously considered his transfer to the main office. But before that, he had to undergo training and improve his qualifications. Michael enjoyed attending training sessions, going on business trips to London, and was very proud of himself. He seemed to have forgotten all about his young fiancée, and only remembered when he needed intimacy. They didn't talk about each other. They hardly ever went anywhere together, and outside the bedroom, Vicky seemed to cease to exist for him. At the same time, he began to have affairs on the side with colleagues, clients, and just casual acquaintances. Michael was literally obsessed and addicted to intimacy, and intimacy with different women, and constant new victories on the personal front were an important part of maintaining his self-esteem. At this time, Vicky discovered that she was pregnant and happily broke the news to her fiancé. They had already delayed the wedding, and it seemed to the girl that now Michael would hurry things up. But the news that he was going to be a father only made Michael angry and mad. He immediately began to insist that the child should be gotten rid of because they are still so young and they have their whole life ahead of them, and with offspring can wait. Vicky was shocked by such words, but flatly refused to terminate the pregnancy. Then the groom decided to press her in another way. Michael began to convince the bride that such news will cause anger in her religious parents, because their youngest favorite daughter lived with a man and got pregnant without being married. However, according to him, the termination of pregnancy will be hidden from everyone, and after the wedding, they will certainly have children. For Vicky, it was a difficult decision, but her chosen one had a real gift of persuasion, so that a few days later she gave in to persuasion and went to the hospital. Unfortunately, it was not without complications. Vicky for a few days stayed in the hospital, and then it took her almost 3 weeks to recover her health. For all this period, the doctor categorically forbade her to have an intimate life, and Michael, learning about it, went into a rage. Then Vicky finally realized that he had mental problems and a real addiction to sexual contacts. Beloved literally went crazy without intimacy and began to leave the house every day, explaining it with urgent matters at work. Vicky guessed that he was looking for intimacy on the side, but sincerely hoped that everything would change once they got married and she would help him get rid of this addiction, a loveless marriage and an adult mistress. The engagement lasted almost 2 years, and the man, apparently, did not even intend to marry the chosen one, because the current state of affairs suited him quite well. He had a fiancée who faithfully waited for him at home and fully served him in the household, and numerous mistresses on the side which he regularly changed. Vicky always took him at his word, and even if she found out about his cheating, she always forgave him, as long as he promised that it was the last time and he would not do it again. But time passed. Vicky began to insist on marriage, as she wanted a full-fledged family and children. Also, this question was increasingly raised by her parents, but most importantly, the wedding was insisted on by Michael's parents, whom he really did not want to upset. Modest and sweet Vicky, they liked them very much, and they considered her a great couple for their son, and were constantly interested in when they will get married and make them happy with grandchildren. Not without the help of their parents, the couple organized a lavish wedding with a white dress, limousine, and a beautiful away ceremony. The newlyweds looked in love and happy. It seemed that they had a long life ahead of them. But hardly any of the relatives guessed about the dark side of the man, with which his young chosen one was already so well acquainted. The newlyweds settled in a large and cozy house in the prestigious area of Warrington, not far from Roberts's parents. Michael did not love his spouse, however. Marriage made him normal in the eyes of relatives and others. Vicky never complained to anyone about his strange predilections and constant cheating, and he could continue to change mistresses like gloves. At work, he was quite successful, got another promotion, and was making good money. After being transferred to a new office, Michael's direct boss was a certain Carrie Hall, the head of administration at Phones, 4U. She was 10 years older than him, had been divorced for a long time, and was raising a son on her own. At the same time, Carrie was quite attractive, well-groomed, and, as her position required, determined and strong-willed. For a long time, she did not pay any attention to the signs of attention that she was given by a young subordinate. However, for the guy it became a kind of signal to action. He sought to achieve this woman, connecting all his natural charm and eloquence, and after about a month, Carrie reciprocated. Lovers began to meet regularly in hotel rooms, and their relationship the woman later described as turbulent, passionate, and full of experimentation. Carrie was a mature, self-confident woman. She was undoubtedly flattered by the attention of such a young man, and she was also not opposed to trying something new. So Michael could realize with her those fantasies which did not dare his modest wife. He constantly lied to his wife about being late at work, attending corporate trainings and the like, and told his mistress how unhappy he was in marriage, that this union was a mistake of youth, and said that he was ready to divorce, but his wife does not give him a divorce. This relationship with Carrie lasted more than a year, but since the woman had no illusions about Michael, she did not insist on divorce, and she was quite satisfied with their meetings in hotels, marks on the body, and dangerous games. After the beginning of relations with Michael, Carrie began to give preference to buried clothes with long sleeves and high throat, which was unusual for her. The woman was actively engaged in sports, and always liked to show others her stunning figure. And here suddenly, completely changed her style. Once Hall admitted to her close friend that her lover loves to experiment in intimate terms, and sometimes these experiments go beyond reason. As evidence, she showed a bite mark on her chest, which Michael left in a fit of passion. Also on her neck there were blue marks from squeezing by his hands, and on her wrists there were marks from the ropes, with which the boyfriend liked to tie her so that she was completely in his power. The friend was horrified and suggested that Carrie go to the police, but she refused, noting that all this was consensual, and in most cases, he warns her about what he is going to do, but the process itself can get out of control. For example, Michael loved to strangle his partner, convincing her that it would increase the pleasant sensations of the process. but a couple of times he was so much carried away that she lost consciousness. Vicky was very afraid of such games with strangulation, but every time she succumbed to her husband's persuasions and believed that one day he would get tired of it. He would leave his cruel and painful experiments, or she would get used to it and would perceive them as something ordinary. Unfortunately, neither his wife nor any of his mistresses even tried to stop Michael. Open correspondence and a love letter. Vicky had guessed about her chosen one's affairs on the side, even before they were married. She, most likely, even realized that he was addicted to it, but sincerely believed that something was about to change, and her love and care can turn daring and loving Michael into an exemplary family man. But after the wedding, the situation only worsened, and the young husband himself denied his cheating, and he did it very convincingly. Vicky decided to conduct her own personal investigation and looked into her husband's phone while he was sleeping. There she found numerous correspondence Michael with Carrie and several other girls, which he did not even bother to delete. Their content was quite intimate, moreover. With some girls, the guy exchanged explicit photos. This came as a shock to Vicky. She packed her things and decided to move in with her friend for a while. She did not tell her parents and sister anything about what was happening, afraid to upset them. So her family was sure that Vicky was happily married. Besides, religious relatives would have insisted on a divorce when they learned of her husband's infidelity. But after all, Vicky was in love and didn't want to break up with her husband. Leaving, she wrote Michael a touching letter in which she confessed her love for him and called the main man in her life. At the same time, she admitted that she knows about his cheating and does not want to put up with it and therefore leaves, but gives him time to think about it and will not yet file for divorce. She wrote it all by hand on paper and left it on the refrigerator with a magnet. Michael was not touched by the message or saddened by the departure of his wife, but he did not want to lose a quiet and submissive woman who always waited for him at home, fully served in the household, and tolerated any of his antics as well as peculiar predilections. That same evening, he followed Vicky to her friend's house, picking up a large bouquet of flowers on the way. Michael on his knees apologized and begged her to return to him, promising that from now on she would be his only woman. Vicky once again believed, or rather she wanted to believe, and returned to their home, a new mistress. Naturally, Michael did not leave Carrie and continued to meet with other women, but for a while he was extremely careful and even tried to come home for dinner, which his wife carefully prepared. He hid his phone, deleted correspondence, and even changed the password from his social networking page. At that time, he began to have an affair with a new young female employee of the company, Karen Wilson, not stopping the relationship with Carrie. At that time, the girl had a fiancé, and she was preparing for the wedding, but Michael began to persistently pursue her, making himself a miserable lover. He was so attracted to the new object of the hunt that after 2 months, he decided to break off the relationship with 33-year-old Carrie Hall, which he was tired of. The man told Karen a proven legend about how he is unhappy in marriage, and for the sake of her ready to leave his wife. Soon she surrendered, and between them happened intimacy right in the office, and a week after that she broke off the engagement and waited for the lover to respond. However, Michael was not going to divorce, but also to interrupt the connection with a new mistress he did not want, and therefore just lied to her that he had already filed for divorce and moved to live in the house of his parents. Fatal blackmail. Vicky soon suspected that her spouse continued to cheat on her, and this time decided to act for sure. She took Michael's phone while he was in the shower, but could not find anything there, because he had taken into account his previous mistakes and deleted all text messages, and on the page in the social network now had a different password. Then Vicky waited until her husband fell asleep and took his work laptop, which he always carried with him, and on which, as it turned out, he did not leave his account in the social network. There, Vicky found correspondences with an already new girlfriend, in which her husband confessed his love to her, claimed that he was divorcing his wife and living with his parents. It was a real shock for her. She took screenshots of the love and intimate messages exchanged between the couple and saved them on her laptop, so that she could have proof of her husband's infidelity. Vicky also looked in her husband's wallet, where she found several folded checks for hotel rooms. In the morning, she presented all this to her spouse, and for the first time in their entire time together, she gave him a scandal. Michael was discouraged. He tried to apologize again and promised that it would not happen again, but Vicky suddenly said that she would tell his parents about everything, hoping that they would be able to talk some sense into him, since she could not do it. Michael was literally mad from such threats. He did not want his parents to know anything, and slapped his wife. Then Vicky got up and said that she would go to them immediately, and then headed for the door. Her spouse caught up with her, hit her twice in the head with a heavy jewelry box he grabbed from the dressing table, and after she lost consciousness, he squeezed her throat with his hands until she stopped breathing. The man felt no pity or remorse. He wrapped the body in a blanket and tacked it into several large garbage bags, and then carried the gruesome bundle into his garage. Michael then quickly cleaned up the house, packed and removed most of his wife's belongings, and immediately called Karen, whom he invited over. They had dinner, had fun in the house, where a couple of hours ago Roberts killed his own wife, and then made love in the bedroom, where, in fact, everything happened. Ran off with her lover? The very next day, Michael informed his parents that his wife left him, having run away with another man. To do this, he personally went to their home and literally sobbed on his mother's shoulder, showing her messages from his wife, which he himself sent from Vicky's phone. The messages said that she had fallen out of love with him, met another man, and decided to live with him. Parents, as they could, consoled their son, and sincerely bewildered how their sweet, kind, and religious daughter-in-law could do such a thing. In parallel with the phone of the deceased, Michael sent messages and her parents, which said that she fell in love with another, left with him, and asked for now not to bother her and give time. Naturally, the couple Smith immediately rushed to call their daughter to find out everything and hear her explanations, but the calls were constantly rejected, and in response only came messages asking to give her time. This seemed very strange to Vicky's parents, and they went to Michael's house to talk to him, but his story only raised more questions and doubts. And after they found out that Vicky was not showing up for work without saying anything to anyone, they decided to go to the police. An investigation, a gruesome discovery, and an escape. On the 1st of December 2009, Michael bought a shovel, several meters of rope, as well as rags and detergents from a hardware store. However, he did not manage to get rid of the body, because on the same day the police visited him at home. Then the police could not find anything suspicious, but Michael's behavior and story raised a lot of questions and doubts. However, the strangest thing was that they did not pay attention to the huge package in the corner of the garage during the inspection. In the house, there were no clothes, documents, and personal belongings of the missing woman, which could indicate that she had left, but Vicky's laptop was in the bedroom, and the police seized it for inspection. There, they found screenshots of Michael's correspondence with his mistresses, which Vicky had saved, and then decided to make a geolocation request of Vicky's cell phone, from which regularly came messages to her husband and relatives. And then it turned out that the phone had been in her and Michael's marital home all along. After that, law enforcers again visited the house of Roberts and conducted a more thorough search, finally unwrapping a strange package in the garage. The find shocked everyone present, but then it was discovered that Michael, who had been walking with the police all this time, disappeared somewhere right under their noses. He took with him a wallet with cash, so that several days he managed to hide without giving himself away. Arrest, trial, and conviction. When the money ran out, Michael came to one of his mistresses, whose name was Lavinia Talley, and asked to live in her house for a while. In the evening, the girl heard from the news that her lover was wanted on charges of murdering his wife, and immediately, without hesitation, reported to the police about his whereabouts. At the time of his arrest, Michael was crying and said he was innocent of anything. The man insisted that his spouse died during their intimate games when she asked to strangle her with a robe belt, and he overdid it. However, forensic experts found that firstly, the woman was strangled with her bare hands, secondly, she was attacked from the back, and thirdly, There are 2 extensive hematomas on her head received during her lifetime, which can definitely have nothing to do with intimate relations. The trial of the perpetrator began in January 2010. The defendant kept insisting that his wife's death was the result of an accident and hoped for leniency. However, the autopsy results presented by experts proved that the man in cold blood hit his wife twice on the head and then strangled her and hid the body in the garage. Michael Roberts was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. However, the court left him the possibility of applying for parole after 17 years in prison. That is, the criminal has a good chance of being released in 2027. The Marlene Oaks case. Who owns the skull found in the woods? A crime is considered perfect when it has achieved its main goal and the perpetrator has not been punished or has not been suspected at all. However, these days, thanks to the latest technology and scientific approach, it is becoming increasingly difficult to commit such a thing. Moreover, even old, unsolved cases that seemed perfect in the past are being successfully solved decades later. In 1980, an auto mechanic named William Bill Major also thought he had committed the perfect crime that would never be solved. Hardly a man could have guessed that, more than 2 decades later, he will still have to stand trial and get a well-deserved sentence. And the initiator of the new investigation was his own daughter, whom he deprived of a mother in early childhood. And now, let's study the whole story in detail, deconstruct this perfect crime and imminent punishment. To be fair, it should be noted that this high-profile and very cruel case of the disappearance of a young mother, Marlene Oaks, could have been solved back in the distant 80s because the victim herself, who had a premonition of her imminent death, left many clues to the police, to which the law enforcers for some reason did not pay due attention. Marlene Oaks, the early years. A girl named Helen Marlene Oaks was born in 1954, the 7th of December, in the small town of Martinsville, in the state of Virginia, and was the middle of 3 children of the spouses Lorraine and William Oaks. She was raised with an older brother and a younger sister. Their family lived quite modestly, but the parents always tried to provide their children with everything they needed and bring them up worthy people. By the way, our today's heroine from childhood preferred to use her middle name, Marlene, which she liked much more than Helen. She was petite and very cute blonde, with brown eyes and a charming smile, so it was not surprising that she had a lot of admirers from an early age. At the age of 16, barely out of school, the girl, wanting to soon start an independent life and escape from parental care, hurried to tie herself to the bonds of marriage. Her chosen one was a man named William Major, who was 10 years older than her, but the couple in love, the difference in age did not confuse. The chosen one worked as an auto mechanic and seemed to the girl a serious and reliable man. Unhappy family life. Soon after the couple officially legalized their relationship, they settled in a trailer park on the outskirts of a small country town of Verona, located in Boone County, Kentucky. In 1972, the couple had their first common heir, a son, to whom they decided to give the name Donald. At that time, Marlene was barely 17 years old, and her husband was already 27 years old. 4 years later, the couple had a younger daughter, Lalana. The couple still lived in a small trailer on the grounds of the trailer park. Marlene was a homemaker, raising their children and making their modest home comfortable, while Bill worked at a service station fixing cars. He was good at what he did and was, so to speak, a jack of all trades. He had every chance to build a brilliant career, to open his own business, but the man did not particularly strive for anything. Money spouses barely enough for the essentials, but the head of the family, every time he managed to earn a little more, as a rule, spent it all on drink. Later, his addictions were joined by the use of illegal substances. At the same time, Bill was a sociable person, sociable and seemed very friendly to others. All these qualities helped him a lot in his work. People who turned to his workshop for help often came back again and also recommended Majors as a good specialist to their friends. However, at home, Bill became a completely different person, rude, selfish, and cruel. Former feelings that had once linked their lives together with Marlene seemed to have evaporated without a trace, left only misunderstanding, resentment, and irritation. The couple often quarreled, and sometimes their heated arguments escalated into violence. Bill was not a caring husband and loving father, and over time he became more and more like a domestic tyrant. A new neighbor and a secret lover. In 1978, a young Canadian named Glenn St. Hiller was passing through the town of Verona, and his truck suddenly broke down. On the advice of the locals, he went to the workshop of Bill Major, who willingly undertook to repair the vehicle. The stranger was traveling from Ohio to Texas. He didn't know anyone in the area, and the only hotel in the suburbs was closed, and he simply didn't know where to stay. When Glenn complained to the auto mechanic about the situation he found himself in, Bill promised to help, and quickly found him a place to stay in a trailer park and invited him over for dinner. The guest was literally enchanted by Marlene's beauty, her kindness, and friendliness. The young woman cooked a delicious meal, willingly and with interest kept the conversation, seemed very nice and open. 2 weeks later, Glenn visited Verona again to thank Bill for his help, and after another month he decided to move here for a while. The man settled in the same suburban trailer park and took a job in Bill's shop, becoming Bill's subordinate. Also, the new neighbor began to show interest in Marlene, and in every possible way sought meetings with her. The situation in the family Major has long been very tense. The spouses only quarreled, shouted at each other, exchanged insults, and sometimes even fought. For Marlene, communication with kind and courteous Glenn became a real outlet. They quickly became close, and soon became lovers. The couple spent all their free time together, trying to hide from prying eyes, but in a quiet suburb where everyone knows each other, gossip spreads quickly. Soon the rumors reached Bill, but the cheating husband didn't seem particularly upset about it. Moreover, he even strangely encouraged their relationship, and he seemed to have lost interest in his young wife. The explanation for this behavior was soon found, and it turned out to be truly monstrous. Major, as it turned out, had an unhealthy interest in his own children, and soon he began to realize his secret fantasies. The ugly truth and the beginning of the divorce proceedings. Soon, Marlene noticed some oddities and changes in the behavior of 8-year-old Donald. The boy became withdrawn, nervous, did not sleep well, and was afraid to be alone with his father. When his mother decided to have a frank talk with him, the child told her the terrible things his father did to him and asked her to protect him. Marlene was horrified by her son's confessions and realized that it was simply impossible to continue living like this. She had long planned to divorce Bill, get sole custody of the children, and move with Glenn and the kids to her native Virginia, closer to her parents. Her lover also suggested that she do this, and now there was a real reason to hurry up with the divorce and move. Marlene told her husband everything she had learned from her son about his unacceptable behavior, declared her intention to divorce, and also threatened to report him to the police. The scandal quickly escalated into manhandling, and Bill hit his wife hard in the face several times. From that moment, the spouses were literally in a state of war. Marlene initiated the beginning of the divorce process, but separated from her husband, she could not yet because of the children, because she wanted to achieve officially sole custody of them. Her husband beat her almost daily, insulted her, and threatened to kill her. He promised to kill her and said that he would make sure that no one would ever find the body and that he would stay with the children. The unhappy young woman simply did not know what to do. She secretly kept a personal diary in which she wrote down everything Bill said to her, how he threatened to kill her and cover his tracks. Moreover, several times, being in a state of alcoholic intoxication, Bill described in detail how he would get rid of his wife, dismembered her, and hid the remains in different places. The most important role in hiding the crime he assigned to the removal of all the teeth, so that the body would not be identified by dental records. It is noteworthy that all these terrible things Major and Cullors described not only his wife, but also some of his friends, who, however, did not take his words seriously. Meanwhile, the situation was escalating, and the neighbors who lived in the trailer park became daily witnesses of the stormy marital strife. Marlene runs away with no kids and no lover. Everyone knew that Marlene had filed for divorce and was planning to move to another state with Glenn and the children. No one judged Marlene. Everyone knew how difficult and unhealthy the situation was in her family. But relatives and neighbors expected that everything would be resolved in a peaceful and civilized way. On October 11, 1980, around noon, the spouses once again loudly scandalized, but soon all quieted down. Toward nightfall, an agitated and angry Bill led the children to one of the neighboring trailers and knocked. He said that his wife had run off with her lover, leaving his son and daughter behind, and asked him to watch the kids until tomorrow while he tried to find Marlene and bring her home. The neighbors agreed to shelter the children for the night, and immediately thought that the young woman had run away with Glenn, but wondered how a loving and caring mother could abandon her adored offspring. What was everyone's bewilderment when Glenn came out of his trailer in the morning, and to all the questions about the escape, he only stared at those around him incomprehensibly. It turned out that he had not seen his beloved since yesterday, and in general was not aware that she disappeared somewhere. Then Glenn himself went to Bill to clarify the situation, but the furious husband only shouted that his wife found another lover and lost her head. However, Glenn did not believe his words, because he knew for sure that no other man at Marlene was not, and she under no circumstances would not abandon the children. A day later, Major himself went to the police, where he reported the disappearance of his wife, outlining his version of events. He added that their family car had also disappeared, which he believed supported the runaway version. But the police also found the whole story very strange. They had the impression that Bill was making it up as he went along, sometimes contradicting himself and confusing himself in elementary clarifying questions. Search for the missing woman, interrogation of witnesses. The police decided to begin the investigation of this case with a survey of neighbors and relatives of the couple, as well as studying the circumstances of the disappearance of the young woman. All unanimously spoke about the difficult relationship between the spouses, but claimed that Marlene would never have left Donald and Lalana because she loved them more than life. There were also those who heard about Bill's creepy stories about how he would kill his wife and dispose of the body. This prompted the man's arrest and interrogation, but he himself claimed that it was just drunken chatter, and he didn't really intend to harm his spouse. The next oddity was that a search of the house revealed the missing woman's passport, wallet with cash and driver's license, as well as all of her personal belongings. It seemed as if she had just gotten into a car and left without her belongings, money, or documents. But where to? Marlene's relatives could not answer this question, but her sister mentioned about their last disturbing phone conversation, that Oaks was afraid for her life, and kept a diary in which she wrote down everything that happened to her. The information about the diary was of great interest to the detectives, but nothing similar was found when they searched the trailer. A few days later, Glenn showed up at the police station with the diary. He explained that Marlene had left her notes for him to keep, in case something happened to her, or she disappeared somewhere without a trace. When the woman did go missing, he waited a few days and then, realizing she wasn't coming back, took the notebook to the station. The pages contained some truly gruesome entries, including beatings, humiliation, and threats. There was also a detailed description of how Bill had promised to kill his wife. In addition, Marlene wrote about the fact that the husband showed a sick interest in children. In this regard, it was decided to talk to Marlene's son, but he did not provide any valuable information, practically did not answer questions, and only constantly asked to let him go home. For some reason, the detectives did not pay attention to the fact that the boy was scared and simply could not truthfully answer questions. His father had interviewed him beforehand, and Donald was afraid to say anything unnecessary for fear of his parents' anger. They decided not to traumatize 4-year-old Lalana and did not interrogate her. For the next few weeks, police officers scoured the neighborhood looking for any leads or clues. Marlene and her car were wanted statewide, but the young woman and the vehicle seemed to have vanished into thin air. There was no reason to believe she was dead or murdered. The investigation has reached a dead end. The move looks like an escape. Despite the fact that relatives and neighbors testified against Bill, and the man himself was repeatedly called in for questioning, no grounds for his arrest were ever found. Neither a body nor any conclusive evidence that Marlene might have been seriously injured was found, and she was still missing. Major began to quickly sell off his property, explaining that he was going to move closer to his parents because it is very difficult for him to manage 2 children after the escape of his wife. Among other things, he sold his weapons, namely a rifle, a shotgun, and a couple of pistols. His strange behavior resembled not a preparation for moving, but an ordinary escape. To the children, Bill kept telling them that their mother never loved them, so she abandoned them. He said that Marlene was an alcoholic, that she had tons of lovers who were more important to her than her family. Bill diligently turned his son and daughter against their own mother, trying to make them hate the most dear person. It should be noted that he succeeded quite well, because Donald and Lalana were still small and blindly believed their father. Soon Bill and his children moved to the state of Rhode Island, where his parents lived. There they purchased a trailer and settled down for many years. But after the disappearance of Marlene, in the life of Donald and Lalana began a real black streak. Their father brutally beat them, abused them, humiliated them, and did even more terrible things. At first, it was mostly Donald who was subjected to these tortures, but as Lalana grew older, the bitter fate did not spare her. About a year later, the man had a new lover named Pauline, with whom they began to live together, but could not legalize their relationship because Major was still married to the missing Marlene. Nevertheless, the couple had a child together, and for some time the family lived a quiet life, until one day Pauline herself did not witness what Bill was doing with his own son. She immediately went to the police, telling them everything, took her child, and left. Bill was eventually arrested, and his children went to live with their maternal grandparents in Virginia. A gruesome find in the woods. About 1.5 years after Marlene's mysterious disappearance, a hunter came across a frightening sight in a wooded area near a Verona trailer park. He saw that his dog had started digging in the ground, and something resembling a fragment of a human skull emerged. The man immediately reported it to the police, and the arriving experts confirmed his hunch. It was indeed a badly damaged skull. The found remains were immediately sent to forensic experts for a detailed study, and the conclusions of experts were really frightening. The skull had a missing lower jaw and not a single tooth. There were 2 bullet holes in it, and the shots were made at point-blank range. And also the experts revealed on the bones chopped marks from a large knife or axe, which probably separated the head from the body. It was impossible to determine unequivocally to whom this skull belonged, but judging from the size and condition of the bones, it was assumed that it was a young woman, under 30 years of age. Naturally, the story of Marlene's disappearance immediately came to mind. The entire area within a radius of several kilometers was thoroughly combed, but no other remains or belongings were found, and so the discovery was dubbed Jane Doe, which means unknown, and the search was suspended. A new investigation 20 years later. When Donald and Lalana moved into their grandparents' house, their lives gradually got better. Most of all, they were afraid of the day when their father would be released, but Bill, after his release, was not interested in his grown-up offspring at all, and did not even try to get in touch with them. For a long time, Lalana did not talk about her mother at all, because she was angry at her for leaving them with a tyrant father. But one day, during a frank conversation with her grandmother, Lalana asked her why her mother had fallen out of love with her and her brother and left the family. To what the old woman replied that she did not believe in the story of the escape and believes that it was her spouse has dealt with her. At this point, the girl's world turned upside down. She looked at the situation in a completely different way and realized that the grandmother was right. The girl decided to conduct her own investigation and uncover the mystery of her mother's disappearance. The first thing Lalana did was to keep a notebook in which she wrote down everything she could remember from her childhood, as well as everything her older brother knew and remembered. In 1998, when the girl was already 22 years old, she decided to go to her native Verona in order to talk to former neighbors and find out if any of them have valuable information that will help her. As it turned out, in those places still lived Glenn, who did not lose hope that one day the mystery of the disappearance of his beloved will be solved. His personal life has not developed. The man was lonely, worked at a local factory, and was constantly interested in the investigation of the case of Marlene Oaks. It was from Glenn Vallana learned about the diary that her mother kept, which she gave him for safekeeping before her disappearance. This diary was later added to the case file and lost somewhere on the shelves of the police archives. Lalana was able to get permission to see her mother's writings and was literally shocked by the contents of the diary. Not only did her mother know she was about to die, but she also gave the name of her killer, the method of death, and the process of hiding the evidence. After reading the notes, the girl immediately rushed to her father, whom she had not seen for more than 10 years, in order to find out the truth. It should be noted that Bill, after his release from prison, remarried, but in 1995 he had a stroke, and since then he has been confined to a wheelchair. When he learned the reason for his daughter's visit, he only laughed in her face. Lalana begged him to tell her where he had hidden Marlene's remains so that she could give her mother a decent burial. The girl promised that she would not go to the police, and everything Bill said would remain just between them. But the father only insulted his daughter, called her crazy, and said that she would never know what happened to her mother. From her mother's diary, Lalana learned about the perfect crime her father was preparing, which included dismembering her, removing all of her teeth, and burying the remains in different places. Also, Lalana, who along with her brother was bullied by Bill as a child, found out some horrific details from her father's biography. It turned out that even before meeting their mother, Bill served time for harassment. But for some reason, this circumstance police officers passed over when entrusted Majoru custody of the children after the disappearance of their mother. In 2000, 2 decades after Marlene's disappearance, her daughter initiated a new investigation into the case, providing all the materials she had managed to collect on her own. Lalana and her brother were re-interviewed, and this time they recounted everything their father had done to them, the beatings being the least of their troubles. At the same time, Lalana learned about an unidentified skull fragment with no teeth or lower jaw that had been found in the local woods a year and a half after her mother's disappearance. She began to insist on the need for DNA testing, but at the time the procedure was extremely expensive, and government agencies refused to cover the cost. However, Lalana did not even think of giving up and organized a fund to raise money for the procedure. Relatives, neighbors, and just concerned people joined in, and eventually, by the beginning of 2001, Lalana already had the necessary amount of money to carry out the identification procedure. The analysis established the degree of the girl's kinship with the previously unidentified remains and determined that the skull fragment found did indeed belong to the missing Marlene Oaks. Then Lalana, already having the results of the examination, went to her paternal grandfather to talk to him and find out if he knows anything. The elderly man was shocked by the news and agreed to testify to the police against his own son. Bill's father said that back in 1980, his son, being in a state of alcoholic intoxication, told him that he killed his wife with 2 shots in the head, dismembered her body with a hunting knife, and buried the remains in different places at an impressive distance from each other. At the same time, he got rid of the lower jaw and teeth especially carefully. As for Marlene's car, he threw it off a cliff into the river, but the police eventually failed to find the car or its fragments. Most likely, for more than 2 decades, the turbulent mountain river either carried the vehicle far downstream or completely destroyed it, literally grinding it against sharp rocks. A trial and a just verdict. Despite the new circumstances and the evidence found, there was still no probable cause to arrest Bill. Then the police decided to go for a trick and asked Bill's father to bring his son to a frank phone conversation so that he confessed to everything. The trick succeeded, and Major, learning that his daughter seeks to resume the investigation, said that she will not succeed because he has safely hidden all the fragments of his wife's body, her car, and got rid of the instrument of crime. It was these words of Bill that became the reason for his arrest, because he actually confessed to everything himself. In July 2001, the man was taken into custody. After listening to the recording of the telephone conversation, as well as learning about the identification of the skull, he confessed to what he had done. However, he blamed everything on his late wife, saying that she simply drove him to scandals, cheating, as well as threats to take his children and forbid him to see them. At the trial, Bill told his version of the story, saying that he and his wife had a fight in the car and she started threatening him with a gun, but he grabbed the gun from her and allegedly accidentally shot her twice in the head, except that the shots were fired into the back of her head at point-blank range, which looked like a premeditated crime, but not self-defense. Bill's trial did not begin until the summer of 2003, 23 years after his crime. At the hearing, the 59-year-old defendant was brought in a wheelchair. He himself behaved calmly and was confident that he would be able to avoid punishment. The lawyer hired by him insisted that this crime was the result of self-defense, and the stories of Lalana and Donald about harassment are not true. But despite the defense's best efforts, the court found Major guilty of the brutal, premeditated murder of Marlene Oaks. The man was sentenced to life in prison, which came as a complete surprise to him. In December 2016, Bill tried to apply for parole but was denied. A year later, he died in prison after suffering a second stroke. The case of Rosa Maria Peral. Vinuela, a body in flames. A love triangle typically leads to no good, with all involved parties inevitably suffering as each one becomes dependent. The very emergence of a new participant in a relationship signals trouble in the couple's interaction. Yet some believe that monogamy is a thing of the past, advocating for relationships where one is not limited in the number of loved ones. Such was the belief of our protagonist today, who shattered the lives and destinies of the men unfortunate enough to be close to her. The case of Rosa Maria Peral Vinuela caused quite a stir in Spain a few years ago. This woman easily entered into relationships, manipulated men by playing with their feelings, and then got rid of her tiresome lovers using harsh, sometimes radical methods. Intriguingly, she worked in law enforcement and often engaged in workplace romances. Rosa was blessed with attractive looks, which she used to her advantage. She had been in an official marriage, was the center of an intimate scandal, and was simultaneously engaged to 2 different men. However, these adventures were not enough for her. She dared to commit a crime against a weary fiancé, attempting to pin the blame on her ex-husband and a lover. The most horrifying aspect was that her own child witnessed this appalling act. Rosa Peral, the early years. Rosa Maria Peral. Vinuela was born on October 15, 1985, in a suburb of Barcelona, becoming the second child in her family. She grew up in a modest household that had migrated from Andalusia in search of a better life. Her mother, Maria, was a homemaker dedicated to creating a cozy home environment and raising the children, while her father, Francisco, worked as a security guard. Rosa was raised alongside her older brother, Paul, with whom she was very close. Those personally acquainted with her described Rosa as sweet, kind-hearted, and friendly. Neighbors spoke highly of the Peral family, considering them a united, strong, and happy household. In school, Rosa was a good student. She wasn't necessarily at the top of her class, but was diligent and persistent, always striving for high grades. She was also active in sports and dreamed of a career in law enforcement. After graduating from high school, she enrolled at Pompeu Fabra University in Barcelona, while simultaneously preparing for the exams and tests required to enter the police academy in Avila. Rosa was strikingly attractive and possessed a powerful charisma, which attracted many admirers from a young age. She skillfully leveraged her allure. During her college years, she worked as a waitress in one of the popular nightclubs, earning a decent salary and tips that allowed her to pay for her education independently. At that time, Rosa was dating a young man named Ruben Carbo, who served in the Barcelona City Guard. He helped his girlfriend prepare for the competitive examinations at the academy. A talent detection test, a multiple-choice exam, and an oral interview. Although Rosa didn't pass the physical test on her first try, her perseverance paid off, and she was eventually admitted to the academy, where she underwent professional training. Peral specialized in general law enforcement activities. She quickly advanced in her career, was highly valued at her service, and her salary allowed her to live comfortably without wanting for anything. A valued employee, a stellar wife and mother. Soon after graduating from the police academy, the young woman married her beloved Ruben. The couple had a modest wedding attended only by their closest relatives and friends. The newlyweds moved to Barcelona, where they soon welcomed 2 daughters, one after the other. At work, Rosa was regarded as a responsible, disciplined, and promising employee. Her attractive and approachable appearance often led to her participation in social media videos broadcasted on local television. In these videos, she encouraged residents and visitors of the city to behave lawfully and with integrity. She even gained some popularity, with people sometimes recognizing her on the street. Rosa was successful in her career, respected and valued as an employee, and at the same time, she was a loving wife and a caring mother to her 2 children. She had an impeccable reputation, inspiring genuine admiration and even envy among those around her. However, no one could have imagined the double life she was leading until one incident. An intimate scandal and the collapse of a reputation. In early 2011, Rosa's colleagues began receiving emails containing photographs and videos of a personal nature. The images showed the married Peral engaging in intimate moments with her former partner, Junior Inspector Oscar Leffs, at their place of work. Outraged by her lover's actions, Rosa immediately filed a complaint with the police, demanding compensation for emotional distress and strict legal action against the perpetrator. However, it proved impossible to establish that Oscar was indeed the one who sent out the photos and videos, though Rosa had no doubts about it, and he avoided any repercussions. Nonetheless, both employees were demoted and transferred to different departments for their inappropriate behavior. Moreover, the distribution of compromising materials did not cease, with not only colleagues but also friends and relatives of Rosa receiving them. A serious scandal erupted, and Rosa's previously impeccable reputation was shattered. The situation had a negative impact on her work, family life, and relationships with colleagues and friends. The young woman was acutely aware that she was being judged by everyone around her, and her actions became one of the most discussed topics. Furthermore, some expressed their disapproval of her immoral actions directly to her face. Rosa's character began to deteriorate rapidly. From a friendly, sociable person, she turned into someone perceived as harsh and even spiteful. However, many rightly considered this transformation a defensive reaction to the bullying and condemnation she faced. Surprisingly, despite such a scandalous and resonant ordeal, Rosa managed to maintain her marriage with Ruben. Yet, the trust between them was irreparably damaged. They stayed together for almost another year and a half until a new romantic interest entered Rosa's life. Another workplace romance and professional misconduct around mid-2012, it became known about Rosa's new romance with another colleague, Albert Lopez Ferrero. The couple spent a significant amount of time trying to keep their relationship under wraps, but between 2011 and 2012, they became involved in several incidents related to the abuse of their official powers. During the investigations into these incidents, the partners and lovers protected each other, which allowed them both to evade any disciplinary actions. It's worth noting that Albert was reserved, shared little about himself, and didn't make close friends among his colleagues. He was seriously into boxing and had a quick temper, which sometimes made him very aggressive, often to the detriment of those who happened to be near him at the wrong time. For instance, in 2011, while he and Rosa were patrolling the streets of Barcelona, Ferrero got into an argument with an immigrant from Senegal who was selling goods on the street without the necessary permit. Instead of taking the vendor to the station, after a brief verbal altercation, Ferrero physically assaulted him, causing severe injuries. However, during the subsequent investigation, Peral defended her lover, claiming that the victim had attacked him first and that he was merely defending himself. Another similar incident occurred, and in 2012, a suspect that Rosa and Albert were supposed to bring to the station mysteriously lost his life during the arrest. The investigation led nowhere, and the partners insisted that the fault lay solely with the deceased himself. Eventually, their version of events was accepted, and the case was dismissed due to a lack of evidence of any wrongdoing. As for the relationship between the two, it could be described as sporadic. The lovers grew closer through their work together, but their passion ebbed and flowed. Albert showed little interest in Rosa beyond physical intimacy. Their affair didn't progress but continued for several years without ending. It seems that both were content with this arrangement. Divorce and a new love triangle. When Rosa and Albert's relationship was no longer a secret, Ruben finally decided to divorce his unfaithful wife, realizing she would never change and would continue to seek other romantic encounters whenever the opportunity arose. The couple managed to avoid public scandals and bitter confrontations, but their parting could hardly be called amicable. Ruben soon entered into a serious relationship with a woman named Antonia, who quickly found common ground not only with his daughters, but also with his ex-wife. Rosa often called Ruben's new partner, sharing her personal disappointments and professional troubles. Antonia listened calmly, offered comfort and even advice. For Antonia, this communication was a sort of assurance that Ruben had no lingering ties to his ex-wife and that their relationship was truly over. Regarding custody, the daughters stayed with their mother, but Ruben was allowed to see them any time and take them home for weekends and holidays. After the divorce, Rosa chose not to continue her relationship with Albert, feeling it was leading nowhere. However, she soon started a new romance with Pedro Rodriguez, who had long shown a keen interest in her and had been actively courting her. Little was known about Pedro. He was born in Barcelona in 1979, where he spent his childhood and most of his adult life. He also worked in law enforcement, albeit in the transportation department, so their professional paths rarely crossed. At the time he met Rosa, Pedro was married and raising a 5-year-old son with his wife. Yet, Rosa's allure was irresistible to him. Consumed with thoughts of her day and night, he didn't hesitate to leave his family as soon as she reciprocated his feelings. Adding complexity to the situation was the fact that Pedro was a longtime friend of Albert's. When news of his romance with Rosa became public, the ex-lover was baffled. Driven by a painful jealousy, he began to harass Rosa, demanding explanations for her actions. To defuse the situation, Peral told Ferrero that the connection between her and Rodriguez could never match the chemistry they had shared over the years. This way, she implied to her former lover that she still harbored certain feelings and physical attraction towards him. The resumption of their intimate relationship seemed inevitable, as a definitive end to their saga had yet to be declared. A double engagement Rosa and Pedro seemed to be living more than a blissful life together. Along with Rosa's children, they settled into a spacious home in a nice neighborhood of Barcelona, traveled often, appeared everywhere as a close-knit family, and seemed genuinely happy. Feeling ready for the next step in their relationship, Pedro proposed to Rosa with a beautiful ring, and she joyfully accepted. The couple started planning their wedding. Around the same time, Rosa began secretly meeting with Albert. Typically, they spent time together in hotel rooms on the outskirts of the city to avoid being seen. Rosa even complained to her lover that Pedro didn't quite measure up to him in intimacy. She also mentioned Pedro's difficult personality and expressed doubts about her future happiness with him. In January 2017, Albert, previously indifferent to serious commitments, unexpectedly proposed to Rosa, presenting her with an expensive ring. Remarkably, she accepted his proposal too, wearing the ring secretly from Pedro. The fact of her double engagement greatly flattered Rosa, and she even bragged about it to her closest friends. Soon, Pedro noticed changes in Rosa's behavior, and her frequent absences led him to suspect. Moreover, Rosa found it increasingly difficult to justify her meetups with Albert. This strained Rosa and Pedro's relationship significantly. They argued often, and Rosa's increasingly aggressive and unpredictable behavior alarmed Pedro, making him fear for his safety. Eventually, Albert disclosed his affair with Rosa to his former friend, sparking yet another scandal. Rosa admitted to the betrayal but assured Pedro it was a one-time incident, driven by threats and pressure from Albert. Pedro pretended to believe her, not wanting to end their engagement, still hoping for a future of happiness together. However, from that point on, he began to monitor her every move, or at least that's what she told everyone. Pedro's fate-sealed Rosa claimed that her fiancé's jealousy was unbearable. He scrutinized her phone calls, monitored her social media interactions, and restricted her from spending time with friends. This behavior infuriated her, and any affection she once had for Pedro had vanished. Instead of confronting him or ending the engagement, Rosa devised a drastic plan to eliminate her troublesome fiancé. She decided to end his life, with Albert playing a pivotal role in this scheme, ready to be the fall guy if anything went awry. In mid-April 2017, Rosa confided her plans to her lover. She outlined that Pedro needed to be removed in such a manner that Ruben would appear to be the primary suspect. This was Rosa's way of retaliating against her ex-husband, who was still fighting for custody of their children. Notably, at this time, her fiancé was undergoing rehabilitation from a complex spinal surgery, during which a titanium plate had been inserted. The conspirators meticulously prepared for their heinous act. Rosa purchased a disposable phone, which she planned to dispose of immediately after the deed was done. They also pre-discussed the details and alternative plans in case any part of their original scheme proved unfeasible. Lovers and accomplices. On the night of April 30th, Rosa prepared a farewell romantic dinner for her fiancé. They spent the evening together, with Pedro blissfully unaware that he had less than a day to live. The following day, Sunday, they went shopping together, visited Rosa's parents, and then headed to her ex-husband's house to pick up the girls who had been staying with him for the weekend. At home, Rosa fed the children and then sent them to their room on the second floor, asking them to stay upstairs. The exact moment Albert entered the house remains unclear, as the accounts from those involved have repeatedly changed and contradicted one another. It is known that Rosa drugged Pedro with an unidentified substance mixed into a water-diluted medication he was taking post-surgery to alleviate pain. Shortly after consuming this mixture, Pedro's reaction became significantly delayed. He struggled with spatial orientation, moved slowly, and had poor cognitive function, making him an easy target. The exact method by which the lovers ended Pedro's life remains unclear, but one of Rosa's daughters, who ventured downstairs amidst the noise, claimed she saw her mother push him down the stairs. However, the court did not take the 6-year-old girl's words into account. Regardless, after the act, the couple placed Rodriguez's body in the trunk of a previously rented car to dispose of it later. There was also speculation that the man was still alive at that moment. The accomplices then drove the car to a deserted marshland outside the city, placed the body in the driver's seat, doused everything in a flammable liquid, and set it ablaze. Rosa thoughtfully left Pedro's phone at the scene, and upon returning home, she called it several times and sent messages begging for forgiveness and asking him to come back. Remains in a burned car. The morning after the incident, Rosa called her father, Francisco, sobbing into the phone, claiming that she and Pedro had a major argument. She told him that Pedro had ended their engagement, stated he no longer wanted to see her, and drove off in his car without specifying his destination. Rosa also reached out to several of Pedro's close friends and relatives, inquiring if they had seen him. She tearfully narrated their dispute and separation to everyone. For 3 days there was no word from Rodriguez, but on the afternoon of May 4th, a young cyclist riding outside the city stumbled upon a burned vehicle containing human bones. He immediately reported his find to the police, and soon an investigative team was at the scene. The car contained severely charred human remains that were unidentifiable. However, a titanium plate recently implanted in the man's spine helped in identifying him. This implant had a unique serial number, which was used to confirm the remains were Pedro's. Based on the car's location and the nature of the fire, Investigators concluded that the vehicle had been intentionally set ablaze, and the driver had either been prevented from escaping or was already deceased at the time of the fire. Given these circumstances, the case was classified as a deliberate act of ending a life. An investigation was launched, the details of which were kept confidential until the trial. Investigation and suspects. Once the remains were identified, police officers were dispatched to Rosa's residence to deliver the tragic news of her fiancé's fate. She attempted to feign shock and grief, but her expression quickly reverted to an indifferent calm as she responded to routine inquiries. Her demeanor was oddly composed for someone who had just been informed of her fiancé's demise. Rosa refused to go to the police station, claiming she had no one to watch her children, and also denied the officers' entry to her home to avoid alarming her daughters. However, she immediately suggested to the officers that her ex-husband, Ruben, could be involved in her fiancé's demise, driven by jealousy. This accusation promptly placed Ruben among the primary suspects, but he soon provided a solid alibi, having spent several days in another city with Antonia, visiting her parents after picking up the girls with Rosa. Rosa herself became a suspect next. Her remarkable calm and detachment raised eyebrows. Yet, aiming to stay ahead, she voluntarily went to the station and suggested her former lover, Albert, as the perpetrator. According to Rosa, he had been harassing her, demanding she break off the engagement with Pedro to marry him instead, and had become enraged and threatening after her refusal. When police arrested Albert as a suspect, he immediately began testifying against Rosa, implicating her as the mastermind and executor of the crime. He disclosed that it was Rosa who had orchestrated the entire plot, including drugging Pedro to incapacitate him, making him an easy target. Rosa was arrested the same day based on this revelation. Trial and sentences. During interrogations, the lovers provided wildly different accounts of the events on that fateful evening. They desperately tried to shift blame onto each other. Their stories were inconsistent, and they struggled to accurately reconstruct the sequence of events. The investigation lasted nearly a year, with law enforcement painstakingly attempting to piece together the crime scene. It became clear that the pair had premeditated the act, indicating it was intentional and planned rather than spontaneous. Despite this, the woman maintained her innocence. She claimed that Albert showed up at her and Pedro's doorstep that evening, armed and irrational. Upon seeing her enraged ex-lover, she fled upstairs, fearing for her daughter's safety and attempting to protect them. At this moment, she alleged, Ferrero carried out the act on her fiancé. Mobile phone data played a crucial role in the investigation. Despite Rosa's belief that they had covered their tracks, investigators discovered she had communicated with her lover using disposable phones on the day of the incident. Additionally, Albert's personal phone was tracked near the location of the burned vehicle on the night of May 1st. The trial of the accused pair didn't begin until February 2020. Despite the woman's attempts to portray herself as a victim, Ferrero's attorney argued that his client only assisted her in disposing of the body, suggesting she was the mastermind behind the entire operation. He described Rosa as a cunning manipulator, capable of using others for her own ends. Antonia, now raising her and Ruben's daughters with him, also testified, reiterating that the older daughter witnessed her mother pushing a bloodied Pedro down the stairs. However, the child's statement was not taken into consideration. Yet, Rosa accused her of lying, claiming Antonia simply wanted to see her imprisoned for as long as possible out of jealousy. In March 2020, both suspects were found guilty of premeditated ending of life and concealing evidence of the crime. Rosa was sentenced to 25 years in prison, while Albert received a 20-year sentence. Additionally, they were ordered to pay nearly 100,000 euros in moral damages to Rodriguez's family. However, as it turned out, all of Rosa's assets were registered in her parents' names, rendering her financially insolvent. Following the verdict, both convicts made numerous appeals, each maintaining their innocence. However, the Supreme Court of Catalonia rejected these appeals, leaving the sentences unchanged. The aftermath for those involved Rosa's parents, despite the guilty verdict, never believed their daughter was capable of committing such a heinous act. Now, the children's biological father, Ruben Carbo, officially serves as their guardian. He raises the daughters from his previous marriage alongside his wife Antonia, with whom he also has a son. Notably, Ruben has always allowed the girls to maintain contact with their maternal grandparents. Interestingly, following Rosa's arrest in 2017, she was only able to see her daughters nearly 2 years later, in the spring of 2019, under the supervision of Ruben and his current wife. However, he has since refrained from bringing the girls to prison visits, believing the environment adversely affects their mental health. In 2022, it was revealed that Rosa, while incarcerated, attempted to hire someone to end the lives of her ex-husband Ruben and Antonia. Her plan was uncovered, preventing the crime. Rosa claimed that desperation to see her children drove her to this drastic measure. She believed that if Ruben were no longer alive, custody would revert to her parents, who she expected would not obstruct the girls' visits. As for Albert, while serving his sentence, he decided to pursue a law degree, enrolling in a Spanish university. He also dedicated himself to learning foreign languages. The case of Rosa Maria Peral Vinuela inspired a mini-series titled Body in Flames, which premiered on Spanish television in the fall of 2023. Additionally, her story became the subject of a documentary film, Rosa's Ribbons, portraying her as an innocent victim. The teenage years are the most challenging of all the stages of growing up. Not a child anymore, but not yet an adult, this time can be characterized. The body undergoes a massive hormonal overhaul, further complicating this transitional period. Yesterday's obedient child becomes unstable and prone to rebellion. A teenager's worldview is a picture of contrasts consisting of black and white tones. The prevailing color in a teen's judgments and actions largely depends on their environment. The story we're about to discuss occurred in Medicine Hat, in the southeast of Alberta, Canada. Incomprehensible cruelty and betrayal befell the Richardson family. Their tragedy gained national attention, and once again, the Gothic subculture came under fire. In town, the Richardson family was considered exemplary. Deborah and Mark, along with their children, 8-year-old Tyler and 12-year-old Jasmine, lived in a beautiful and cozy place. Like all Canadians, they were very hospitable and sociable. Their home was often filled with guests, and the atmosphere was built on principles of love and respect. Everything was going well until the eldest daughter entered puberty. The once calm girl changed beyond recognition. First and foremost, Jasmine's character changed. She became bold and frivolous. Conflicts between her and her parents began to occur, and her academic performance dropped. Secondly, her preferences in music and clothing transformed. Whereas she previously enjoyed modern pop, she now took an interest in heavy rock. Bright colors in clothing were replaced by shades of gray and black, and her dressing style became provocative. Jasmine wanted to appeal to boys, so she began to emphasize her rounded shapes. Her interaction with former friends noticeably decreased. She began to spend more time alone in front of her computer screen. The door to her room was often closed. With the introduction of the internet at home, she became interested in Gothic themes, dark poetry, criminal psychology, and human anatomy. Miss Richardson even identified herself as a witch, preaching the Wiccan religion. For this purpose, she visited various websites of similar nature, where she found a circle of friends who shared her interests. "Welcome to my tragic world," was the greeting on her social media page. It seemed like a typical adolescence, spiced with excessive dramatism and mysticism. However, the girl became more and more detached from her family. In her profile, she listed a fictitious name and age of 15. She liked older interlocutors, wanting to match them. Her parents tried to support their daughter during this difficult period, suggesting spending time together. They looked for common ground, activities. However, she found this uninteresting. Jasmine considered her younger brother to be an annoying nuisance. Thus, she spoke to him less and less. Yet she could spend hours on end at the computer, talking to strangers. Deborah and Mark understood that this state was temporary. She would grow up, become wiser. Therefore, they were quite tolerant of her new hobbies. One day, Jasmine told them she would like to go to a concert of a punk rock band. Her parents agreed, if only they knew what this outing would lead to. Early 2006, Jasmine Richardson went to a concert of a local youth band, pursuing her own interests, knowing he would be there. Jeremy Steinke, the boy who had been stirring her heart for months, he too was fascinated by Gothic culture. They met on a vampire enthusiast's website, where they occasionally communicated. Jeremy portrayed himself as a 300-year-old werewolf thirsting for blood. To prove it, he wore a vial of blood around his neck, though it was unclear whether the fluid was of human or animal origin. Nonetheless, the boy clearly considered himself special, which Jasmine found very appealing. Meeting at the concert, the young people grew even fonder of each other. Eventually, Steinke asked her out, and she joyfully accepted. All would be fine, except Jeremy was 23 years old. The couple knew her parents would disapprove of their relationship, so they kept it a secret. Moreover, his troubled past would hardly endear him to them. The young man was poor and lived in a trailer with his mother and sister. His relationship with his mother was strained due to her excessive drinking. Jeremy had endured her constant stream of volatile partners who often beat him in their drunken rages. As a result, by the age of 13, he was struggling academically and had a fragile psyche. Once, unable to bear such a life, Steinke attempted to hang himself, but was fortunately stopped in time. Afterward, doctors diagnosed him with depression and hyperactivity. Bullied at school, he decided to stop attending. Over time, Jeremy fancied himself immortal and began frequenting websites of similar themes. His online profile was filled with topics like pain, self-harm, blood, and razor blades. No one knew about the couple's forbidden relationship except their friends, who found their love, to say the least, peculiar. Their communication would have remained a secret had the Richardsons not started monitoring their daughter's excessive internet use. Deborah and Mark discovered Jasmine was corresponding with strangers, alarming them as any parent would. Therefore, they decided to remove the computer from the girl's reach. Moreover, they were shocked to learn she had fallen for an adult man with dubious interests. His very nickname, Soul Eater, spoke volumes. Thus, Jasmine and Jeremy's relationship became forbidden. To help their daughter break free from this destructive relationship, Deborah and Mark sought a psychologist's help. They sincerely believed that counseling would benefit their parent-child relationship. To their delight, it did. Jasmine showed compliance and seemed to be returning to a normal life. Promising that it was all in the past, she got her computer back. This became the Richardsons' last fateful decision, leading to their demise. Saturday, April 22, 2006. Preparing for bed, Mrs. Richardson heard a noise in the basement. "Rats again," she thought. Descending, she turned on the light and saw a person in a ski mask. He stood opposite her, looking at her. Startled, she screamed. The stranger rushed at her, covering her mouth. His efforts were in vain. Deborah struggled and screamed louder. He stepped back, drew a knife, and stabbed her in the chest, then again and again. Hearing his wife's screams, Mark rushed down, grabbing the first thing he could find, a screwdriver. He had been fixing an outlet that day and by sheer chance left the tool out. Entering the basement, he was met with a horrific scene, his wife lying in a pool of blood and someone standing next to her. Mark immediately attacked the intruder but received a stab wound to the stomach, followed by more stabs. As the searing pain subsided and his eyes began to close, Mr. Richardson quietly asked, "Why?" "Because your daughter wished it," the attacker replied. Upstairs, Tyler was the only one left. The boy sat on his bed in his pajamas, too frightened to move. The approaching footsteps grew louder, and the bedroom door opened. A few days before the murder, Jasmine was overjoyed. Her parents believed in her remorse, meaning they could now communicate again. Mobile phones were just becoming popular at that time, so the computer remained the only means of communication. As soon as Miss Richardson regained internet access, she immediately wrote to Jeremy. "It all starts with them disappearing and ends with us staying together," she told him. During the days when the young lady was visiting the psychologist, a terrible plan had formed in her head. It solidified over several days of punishment. Surprisingly, Steinke found it enticing, but added that everything needed to be done creatively and with attention to detail. The couple understood that they could not be together as long as the Richardsons were alive. Later, Jasmine's friends recalled how often she spoke about her parents, particularly how much they annoyed her. Therefore, she wanted to end their lives. However, no one took Jasmine's words seriously. Saturday, April 22nd, 2006. Garrett headed across the street to his friend Tyler's house. The boy wanted to play. The weather was nice outside, despite being chilly. Such was the spring that year. When Garrett approached the house, he noticed the blinds were still closed. No one answered his knock on the door. Strange, he thought. The Richardsons should be home. Their car is parked in the driveway. Hoping to see someone, the child curiously peeked into the living room window but saw no one. Then, Garrett decided to walk around to the back of the basement, where he often played with Tyler. Peeking through the window, he saw something strange on the floor. It appeared to be two silhouettes in a pool of blood. The boy informed his mother. Skeptical, she decided to check on the family across the street. They approached the house together. Garrett pointed to the window he had looked through earlier. The woman looked in and recoiled in horror. She immediately called emergency services. Something happened at the Richardsons. They seemed to be lying in the basement floor, all in blood, the neighbor reported. The police arrived promptly. Breaking down the front door, they descended to where Garrett and his mother had seen something. Entering the dark basement, the officers had difficulty recognizing the people lying on the ground. Their bodies were mutilated and bloodied. But there was no doubt. It was Mark and Deborah Richardson, and they were deceased. Blood was everywhere, on the floor, walls, even the ceiling. A bloody mess. No other way to describe what was before them. Later, the police searched the house. In the upstairs children's room, they found a small child. The boy lay in bed among toys, splattered with blood with visible knife wounds. The child's throat had been deeply cut. Medicine Hat had never seen such horror. One officer said, "It will take me decades to forget what I saw today." After the house was searched, the police realized one family member was missing. The Richardsons' eldest daughter was gone. Officers worried she might be in danger. Everything indicated the attack occurred in the basement and the child's room. The rest of the house was undisturbed, and at first glance, nothing was missing. The state of the bodies suggested the crime occurred the previous night. Apparently, the perpetrator broke into the house and attacked the boy and his parents. Then what happened to Jasmine? And where was she? The police began to construct theories about what had happened. Perhaps by some stroke of luck, the girl was somewhere outside the home, safe. Or the perpetrator had abducted her and was now harming her. Or maybe a ransom demand from relatives would come with time. However, as time passed, there were no clear answers. Soon, detectives turned to the media, requesting help in the search for the missing girl. They hoped Jasmine would make contact or someone would provide valuable information. Meanwhile, the investigation into the crime continued. Investigators interviewed relatives, friends, and colleagues about all aspects of the slain family's life. Did they have any adversaries or enemies capable of such a heinous act? However, the more the investigation progressed, the clearer it became. There was no reason to wish death upon anyone in the Richardson family. They were truly wonderful people, faithful spouses and loving parents, except for the eldest daughter. Officers learned that the girl had been causing quite a bit of trouble lately. Therefore, the tone of media announcements changed. This time, the investigation wanted to locate a person of interest. It was entirely possible that the girl knew details about the crime, or she might have been involved in it. Considering the suspect's age, the media could no longer publish her real name, as per Canadian law. Thus, news agencies began to refer to Jasmine Richardson as JR. After it became known about her relationship with Jeremy Steinke, the couple was declared wanted. Initially, the search for the young lovers began among their friends and acquaintances, thinking they might be hiding out with them. However, This lead proved to be a dead end for the police, but they did uncover something intriguing. A few hours after the crime, the young couple was spotted at a restaurant and at a party hosted by an acquaintance. Someone from their circle of friends mentioned that Jasmine appeared unchanged. There was no indication she had been abducted or was in a state of shock. She was drinking and having fun. When friends asked how they managed to escape from her parents, Jasmine laughed. "Jeremy and I just took care of them." "Yes," the boy agreed. "I carved them up like fish." The party guests laughed, thinking it a grim joke, unaware that the statement was true. The involvement in the crime was also confirmed by a comic found in Jasmine's school locker, where she detailed how she would deal with each of her family members, with her boyfriend as her accomplice. Photos of the suspects were distributed widely. It was only a matter of time before a citizen would step forward with information about their whereabouts. Soon enough, information came in. The couple was spotted in the community of Leader, Saskatchewan, approximately 130 kilometers from Medicine Hat. Caught off guard, Jasmine Richardson and Jeremy Steinke were found sleeping peacefully in a pickup truck. Without resistance, they were taken to the police station. Naturally, the couple was interrogated separately, starting with Jasmine. She shared that she was deeply in love with Steinke, and he reciprocated her feelings. However, the difference in age and social status was a barrier between them. According to Jasmine, the Richardsons would never have accepted their relationship. Therefore, Jeremy committed the ultimate act of love. He ended her parents' lives, providing them the chance to be together. When detectives asked if Jasmine was involved in the crime, she said, "I wasn't home when the crimes occurred. I didn't know about what had happened. After I found out, I accepted it. I love Jeremy very much, so I ran away with him." Detectives needed to determine who was the main instigator. Since breaking the suspects proved difficult, the investigation used a cunning strategy. They placed an informant in the cell with Jeremy, who skillfully extracted details that contradicted Jasmine's statements. Jeremy confessed to the informant that the plan to end her parents' lives was Jasmine's idea. Initially, he was not supportive, but agreed after they discovered the forbidden love and took away her computer. "I took care of Deborah and Mark Richardson, and Jasmine took care of her younger brother herself. She literally begged me to leave Tyler for her, though I was glad to settle scores with all of them," Jeremy cruelly revealed. After this confession, investigators confronted Miss Richardson with the recording. She had no choice but to confess to everything, admitting she stabbed her younger brother out of mercy, not wanting to leave him an orphan. Later, the couple shared their social media profiles and passwords with the investigation, which began to examine their correspondence. They had sent each other thousands of messages, confirming Jeremy's statements. Jasmine indeed conceived the plan on her own. Steinke wrote that Jasmine was the only person who supported and approved of his tastes, replacing the society he felt alienated from. Fearing he would lose her, he helped realize the dreadful idea. "I want to slit their throats. They will regret what they have done, especially when I make sure they're gone. They'll pay for the insults. Finally, there will be silence. Their blood will be the payment." Jeremy supported his beloved. His friends also reported that just a few hours before the attack, they watched the 1994 film Natural Born Killers, which portrays a couple committing 9 heinous murders. This story inspired their friend, who said he wanted to enact a similar plan with his girlfriend. "I think it's the best love story of all time," Steinke said. With sufficient evidence at hand, the suspects were charged with 3 counts of homicide. The detectives pieced together the confessions of the accused, witness testimonies, and other case evidence to form a clear picture of the crime. Before the act, Jeremy was intoxicated. Jasmine led him into the house and guided him to the basement, where he attacked her mother. Deborah was the first to die, suffering 12 stab wounds across her body. The deepest wound pierced her chest, reaching 12 centimeters deep and striking her heart. In a rage, Jeremy mercilessly continued his assault on Mark, who sustained 24 wounds, 9 of which were in the back. Like his wife, the family patriarch bled out on the basement floor. Tyler Richardson was the last to die. While Steinke was dealing with the parents downstairs, Jasmine inflicted 5 stab wounds on her younger brother upstairs. After Jeremy finished, he went upstairs to help his girlfriend with the child, coldly slashing the boy's throat as if carving a pumpkin. Afterward, Jeremy went home to wash off the blood, while Jasmine caught a taxi to a restaurant where the couple had agreed to meet. After discussing the night's events, they headed to a party. A friend of Jeremy's, Casey Lancaster, helped them dispose of the evidence and reach Saskatchewan. Words fail to describe the horror they created. The couple embarked on their murderous spree with such ease and nonchalance as if driven by some otherworldly force. It is shocking that during interrogations and their time in custody, not a word of regret or remorse was uttered for their actions. While detained, they wrote letters to each other, calling themselves legends and immortals. In one letter, Steinke proposed to Richardson, who joyfully accepted. Then, unexpectedly, their mad love began to fade like last year's snow. During the trial, they shifted the blame onto each other. In June 2007, Jasmine Richardson was the first to stand trial. She pleaded not guilty, claiming to have been in a zombie-like state and unable to act while Jeremy was killing her family. She also claimed she only wounded her younger brother, and it was Steinke who delivered the fatal blow. Jasmine insisted that their discussions about ending her parents' lives were purely hypothetical, but they appealed to Jeremy so much that he compelled her to turn them into reality. Under 3 counts of homicide, Miss Richardson was sentenced to just 10 years in prison, thanks to the nuances of Canadian juvenile criminal justice law, which states that individuals under 14 cannot be sentenced to more than 10 years of imprisonment. The sentence was aimed more at rehabilitating and restoring the girl's psyche than punishing her. In 2008, Jeremy Steinke's trial commenced. He insisted he had no initial intention of ending the lives of his girlfriend's parents. However, once discovered in the basement, he felt compelled to attack. He claimed he did not harm Tyler, suggesting Jasmine was responsible while he merely watched from the doorway. The defense argued that Jasmine had intentionally seduced him, wishing for him to free her from her parents' strict control. Some friends testified that Jeremy had sought their help with the act, driven by his fear of losing Jasmine to the extent of being willing to do anything. The lawyers also requested the charges be reduced to manslaughter, arguing Steinke was under the influence of substances at the time of the act. Steinke's inconsistencies emerged when, asked by the prosecution why he committed the act, he replied, "When you find your other half, you do whatever it takes for them." Throughout the trial, he remained indifferent to the proceedings, but broke down when Jacqueline May, his mother, testified in his defense. She admitted to bearing significant guilt for his upbringing, as he was often attacked by her partners, subjected to beatings and rejection. Steinke was found guilty on 3 counts of first-degree homicide, receiving 3 life sentences. He would be eligible for parole no earlier than 25 years later, in 2033. Charges of complicity in the act against Casey Lancaster were dropped. In Medicine Hat Court, she was found guilty of obstruction of justice, sentenced to a year of house arrest, and prohibited from consuming drugs and alcohol. While in custody, Jeremy Steinke changed his name to Jackson May. Jasmine Richardson's 10-year sentence included 4 years in a psychiatric facility, where she was diagnosed with conduct disorder and oppositional defiant disorder, indicative of a refusal to follow rules and socially unacceptable behavior, typically more associated with children than adults. This underscored her psychological immaturity and instability during her relationship with Steinke. In her final years under conditional community supervision and attending special programs, medical professionals reported her genuine remorse. After serving her full sentence, she was released in 2016. Currently, Jasmine Richardson lives in Canada under an assumed name. Her true identity still protected from media disclosure. Her return sparked significant public debate, with some arguing she deserved a second chance, while others believe she warranted a harsher penalty. Nonetheless, the residents of Medicine Hat would prefer not to have Miss Richardson as their neighbor again, given the brutality of her crime, Whether Jasmine has truly changed after spending her formative years in detention remains to be seen. Time will tell. The fear of snakes is perhaps the most common phobia on Earth, and it seems understandable. Some of them are lethal, so fearing snakes is just a genetically ingrained instinct of survival in our brains. However, it would be unfair to label snakes solely as predators. They are also amazing creatures with incredible abilities and appearances, capable of evoking a wide range of emotions, but certainly leaving no one indifferent. In our story today, we'll talk about a rare snake that suddenly attacked its owner, ending his life. Ben Renick was just 29 years old when he was found deceased in his renowned snake breeding facility. Benjamin Blue Birch Renick was born in August 1987 in Missouri. He grew up in the countryside alongside his family. Ben had an older brother, Sam, with whom he shared a very close bond. In 1989, the Renick family moved to a picturesque farmhouse. The boys spent a lot of their time outdoors, and it was then that Ben began to take an interest in snakes. A tragic incident in September 1992 triggered a series of unfortunate events. The family was away when a gas leak occurred, leading to an explosion in their beautiful home. The Renicks were forced to move into a trailer. After some time, Ben's mother, Kim, was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. Despite these hardships, the family overcame. They were very close-knit and always supported each other in any situation. Recovering from previous tragedies in 2002, they moved to a new home where a special room was designed for Ben to keep his snakes. In 2009, after a long battle with cancer, Kim passed away. Before her death, she made her sons promise to look after the farm and pass it on to their children. As time went by, Ben's love for snakes knew no bounds, and the young man founded Renick Reptiles, which soon gained recognition. This allowed him to sell snakes worldwide from the United Kingdom to Japan. Breeding snakes became the meaning of his life. He was described as a great breeder who was devoted to his work, caring more about the snakes than the money. The reptile farm bred a multitude of reptilian subspecies, growing and reproducing both the most common species and some of the rarest subspecies on Earth. Ben's reptiles were of immense value. Just a portion of his pie farm collection was valued at over $1 million. However, Ben was lonely and had long dreamed of starting a family. So in 2010 at a party, he met a woman named Lindley. Their relationship progressed rapidly, and within weeks, Ben introduced his girlfriend to his brother Sam and Sam's fiancé Eli. Eli and Lindley had sons from previous relationships, so they quickly found common ground and became friends. Lindley swiftly became part of the Renick family, and they started living together. She assisted Ben on the snake breeding farm. They were in love and lived as a full family even before they made their union official. In March 2012, Lindley gave birth to a daughter, Amelia. Ben was overjoyed to become a father. However, the happy family life once again encountered problems. Frank Renick, Ben's father, encountered significant troubles in his business. Previously, he had engaged in several fraudulent stock transactions to cover medical bills and Kim's treatment. Just a day before the FBI planned to visit the farm, Frank took his own life. Frank's passing halted the investigation. The sons were deeply affected by yet another parental loss, but managed to get through it, coming together and supporting one another once more. Ben inherited the house and farm, while Sam received a sum of money far exceeding the house's value. Each brother had his own family and children, but this never prevented them from living as one big family in their parents' home. They lived together, and Sam, without hesitation, spent his inheritance on repairing the farm. Initially, everything was fine, but soon financial disputes caused a rift between the brothers. After their father's death, Ben focused on his business and his family. He decided to formalize his relationship with Lindley. On April 14, 2014, they married, making Lindley a full-fledged member of the Renick household. Lindley and Ben opened a second business, a spa called Essentia Spa Inc. But the business Lindley managed faced financial difficulties. Ben and Lindley often argued about finances. Lindley worked hard, but not enough to cover the salon's expenses. At the same time, Sam and his wife also faced financial challenges. Ben allowed them to sell some of the furniture in the house. Lindley disapproved, leading to a rift between the families. The relationship was irreparably damaged. Ben decided to improve the family's financial situation by arranging to sell some rare reptiles for a significant sum. However, the deal fell through due to a tragedy that occurred on the farm. On June 8, 2017, Lindley walked into one of the farm's barns. There, on the floor in a pool of blood, laid Ben. Lindley called his brother Sam for help and dialed the emergency number. She reported that she had found her husband unconscious on the ground. During the conversation, Lindley dropped the phone and ran outside. Sam continued the conversation and confirmed that his brother was dead. Sam suggested that a snake might be to blame for what had happened. Montgomery County Sheriff's deputies were called to the snake breeding facility. For the first time in a long while, law enforcement officers were afraid to enter the farm, facing the prospect of encountering over 3,000 snakes and conducting an examination of a man lying in blood, wary of a possible attack from a deadly viper believed to be the assailant. However, when Coroner Dave Colbert arrived and took a closer look, he discovered a shell casing on a shelf at eye level. This was something far more sinister than a venomous snake bite. Shell casings were found near the body, but no weapon was discovered. The assailant had shot Ben multiple times in the back and head. None of the relatives heard shots or saw the attacker. Sam and Lindley were taken to the sheriff's office for questioning. Lindley suggested that Sam might be involved in their husband's death, even citing a motive. Apparently, Ben wanted to sell the house, but Sam was opposed. Sam was asked to undergo a lie detector test, which he passed. The police had no reason to detain Lindley and Sam, so they were released. The investigation into who might have wanted Ben Renick dead began. Various theories were proposed, the first being robbery, but it remained unconfirmed as none of the rare snakes were missing, and all valuable items remained untouched. Just days after the demise of Ben Renick, police interrogated Lindley. They tested her hands and clothing for gunpowder residue, but the results came back negative. Following her husband's funeral, Lindley ceased communications with Sam and Eli. She sold her husband's business, inherited the house, and sought to claim a life insurance payout for Ben worth $1 million. After receiving the insurance money, Lindley planned to sell the Renick family home for $740,000. Sam's family was notified about the eviction. Upon discovering the rapid insurance claim and business sale following her husband's passing, Sam Renick suspected his brother's wife in the tragic event, sharing his suspicions with investigators. Lindley was called in for another interrogation. There, she admitted to having complex relations with Ben and occasionally meeting with a man named Arik. Arik had an alibi, so he was excluded from the list of suspects. Lindley's admissions were startling. It turned out, about 3 years after their marriage was officially registered, she was unfaithful to Ben, with at least 2 different men. Messages between the couple showed that Ben suspected his wife of infidelity, which had indeed strained their relationship lately. On October 5, 2017, the Missouri State Highway Patrol conducted a polygraph test on Lindley, informing her that she had failed. However, without solid evidence linking her to the crime, she was released. Nevertheless, the investigation into Ben Renick's case slowed but did not cease. Later, investigators learned that a month before Ben Renick's passing, Lindley had made her first attempt on his life. She concocted a story of Ben being a cruel tyrant who oppressed her daily and even physically assaulted her. She shared this story with a spa salon co-worker to garner support and assistance. They plotted to end Ben's life by giving him a poisonous protein shake laced with 15 Percocet pills. Unaware, Ben drank it. He fell severely ill during that period but survived, oblivious to the fact that he had been poisoned. Lindley Renick was interrogated by investigators 6 times in total. Further assistance in the investigation came unexpectedly. On January 14, 2020, Information from a state prison surfaced, with a witness claiming to have knowledge about Ben Renick's demise. The witness was Brandon Blackwell. He told Missouri State Highway Patrol investigators that Lindley had shot Ben and had conspired with her ex-boyfriend. Brandon mentioned that he had dated Lindley while she was married to Ben. 1.5 years after Ben's death, they had a child together, but by 2019, they had separated. Brandon claimed that Lindley confessed the act to him. She had conspired with her spa salon co-worker, Ashley Shaw, and another ex-boyfriend, Michael Humphrey. Years after Ben's demise, Lindley Renick and her former boyfriend, Michael Humphrey, were arrested for Ben's death. However, following their arrest, Lindley and Humphrey pointed fingers at each other. So who really pulled the trigger? According to Michael's testimony, on the day of the event, he went to the farm with Lindley, who asked him to pose as a buyer. He put on gloves and was supposed to shoot Ben, but couldn't do it. Eventually, Lindley took the gun and shot her husband herself. The investigation into Ben Renick's death continued for 3 long years. On January 16, 2020, arrest warrants were issued for Lindley Renick, Michael Humphrey, and Ashley Shaw. Ashley was offered immunity in exchange for her cooperation, and she testified against her boss. The former spa salon employee shared that Lindley had complained about her husband and convinced her to assist in a plan. She claimed that Ben was constantly belittling, demeaning, and even physically harming her. Fearing divorce would lead to Ben gaining custody of her children, Lindley decided to eliminate him, planning together to poison him with a lethal cocktail. During questioning, Lindley and Michael accused each other of Ben's demise. In October 2021, Michael Humphrey faced trial in Audrain County. His lawyers hoped that revealing the murder weapon would lead to a second-degree murder charge. Despite possessing the gun, no conclusive DNA evidence was found on it. To lessen his sentence, Michael Humphrey also made a deal with the prosecution, disclosing the location of the murder weapon. His cooperation led to a life sentence on a less severe charge of second-degree murder, without defense at the trial. On January 3, 2021, Michael Humphrey was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole. The trial against Lindley Renick began on December 6, 2021. She was charged with the shooting and demise of Ben Renick on June 8, 2017, at his snake breeding facility in New Florence. Court documents stated that the plot to end Ben Renick's life originated in Lindley's spa salon. The probable cause statement mentioned that Ben was aware of Lindley's financial troubles and that Lindley feared Ben could take her children away, leading her to fabricate a story of domestic abuse. The first attempt to end Ben Renick involved a protein shake laced with narcotics. Search warrants for Ben and Lindley Renick's Facebook accounts confirmed the protein shake story and Ben's awareness of Lindley's financial issues. The court hearing detailed the events of the day Ben Renick was killed, fully reconstructing the sequence of events through cross-examination. On the day of the incident, Michael Humphrey picked up Lindley from the spa salon, while Shaw sent text messages from Lindley's phone inside the spa to conceal their true location and mislead the investigation. According to court documents, Humphrey intended to end Ben's life, but asked Lindley to do it. After firing shots, Humphrey collected most of the casings, but missed some in his haste. He also disposed of Lindley Renick's clothing after returning to the spa, where Lindley took a shower, which helped avoid detection of gunpowder residue on her hands and clothes on the day of the incident. Defense attorney Catherine Berger asked Lindley Renick to share her personal and family history, education in massage therapy, relationship with ex-boyfriend Michael Humphrey, work history, and the lead-up to her marriage with Ben Renick, portraying the suspect as a victim of domestic violence. However, no evidence of such violence was found, undermining this defense narrative. Michael Humphrey was part of a group that allegedly planned to end Ben Renick's life. Lindley Renick described her relationship with Humphrey as codependent, involving his drug dealing and her addiction. Lindley Renick ended her relationship with Humphrey at the end of 2010. According to previous witness statements, she reconnected with him about a month before Ben Renick's death. Linley Renick denied the prosecution's allegations related to the supposed plans to end Ben Renick's life, including the alleged failed attempt to poison Ben with a protein shake containing narcotics. The couple was experiencing both financial and marital difficulties. The spa center was failing, and contractual deals for selling snakes had yet to yield financial benefits. In court, Linley admitted to having extramarital relationships with various men, for which she expressed deep regret. By the time Linley considered discussing divorce, she was unsure who to turn to, given her father's divorce history and his firm views on divorce and affairs. Wanting someone to support her in her conversation with Ben, she reached out to past boyfriends, leading to a reconnection with Michael Humphrey. During cross-examination by the prosecution, Linley admitted to willingly participating in her husband's death and intentionally concealing Michael Humphrey's involvement. Due to marital difficulties, including disputes, alleged physical and sexual abuse by Ben, and the stress associated with his snake breeding business, Linley feared him and was concerned about his mood when she would bring up the topic of divorce on June 8, 2017. Hence, she brought Michael Humphrey to the farm that day. She claimed her presence at the farm was not to end her husband's life, but to request a divorce. Linley said she took some trash from Ben to dispose of. Then she entered the nursery, where she saw Humphrey and Ben finishing washing their hands. Linley recounted not being able to hear their conversation, focused more on how to tell Ben she wanted a divorce. Linley's voice trembled as she described seeing Humphrey draw a pistol and shoot her husband. I screamed and ran outside. Then I heard a few more shots, everything went numb, and I remember just staring at the trees and Michael as he ran up to me and pushed me towards the car, Linley testified in court. Reality hit when she returned to the snake breeding facility and discovered Ben's body. Linley called Ben's brother, Sam, who arrived. They checked for a pulse and whether Ben was breathing, thinking he might still be alive. Linley expressed regret for not telling the police then and there that she had been at the breeding facility earlier with Michael Humphrey and not sharing her version of events. As she was suspected in her husband's death, the life insurance policy Ben Renick had taken out years earlier could mean a payout of $1 million. Linley waived her rights to this money. Ben Renick became the beneficiary of a trust after his father's death. His assets went to Ben Renick and his children, not Linley. Nonetheless, Linley received money she had contributed to the trust and a scholarship for her daughter. Linley confessed she sought support, so she shared her version of events with her then-boyfriend Brandon Blackwell. However, that relationship ended as soon as Linley had Brandon's child. During the court hearing, Linley shared her regrets about her continuous deception. "I was just trying to escape from the truth of what happened," she said, adding that she never wished for her husband's death. Linley Renick's defense team did not petition for a new trial following the final verdict. No appeals were filed against her conviction. Linley Renick filed a defamation lawsuit against Blackwell, claiming his statements about her involvement in her husband's death were false. However, prosecutor Kevin Zellner questioned Linley Renick's testimony during cross-examination. He queried why she did not check on her husband after hearing gunshots, why she did not call 911, why she sent friendly messages to him and Humphrey after the shooting, and why she continued to lie even as emergency responders got involved. Renick admitted to suggesting the police consider Ben's brother as a suspect. Often tearful and somber during her testimony, prosecutor Zellner portrayed her as a mastermind, albeit a clumsy one. He described her as cruel enough to accuse the deceased's brother, saying during his rebuttal, "Do you know how cold your heart is?" During the sentencing for second-degree murder and armed criminal action, Linley Renick broke down. She did not admit her guilt. On December 9, 2021, she was found guilty of second-degree murder. The 33-year-old Linley Renick was sentenced to 13 years for murder and an additional 3 years for armed criminal action. In January, Judge Kevin Crane handed down a total sentence of 16 years. The sentence outraged Sam and other relatives of Ben. They believed that Michael and Lindley deserved life imprisonment, as they were both as guilty as any other co-conspirators. Sam Renick's final words expressed complete disappointment. He was astonished that the life of a person in Missouri could be valued at just 13 years. Ben Renick was a young man full of hope, with a potentially bright future. Due to the actions of one woman, he and Sam found themselves in a difficult situation, now unable to mend their relationship. Yet, the great snake breeder, Ben Renick, continues to live on in a way he would surely have appreciated. He became famous for breeding a new snake species named after him. The reptile community was shaken by Ben Renick's death and wanted to help. They collected and donated money to support Ben's family. Ben's valuable snakes were dispersed and sold to various reptile experts and enthusiasts, while the main snake in Ben's life was sentenced to 13 years. And we may never truly know who actually pulled the trigger, as this story is filled with the lies of the most vile and despicable reptile, Lindley Renick. The case of Nancy Paola Reyes Gores. What led to the crime against the pregnant woman, and what became of the child? The quest for personal happiness and a better life can be long, fraught with difficulties, and doesn't always yield the desired outcome. Many people are drawn to other countries or even the other side of the world in these pursuits, but sometimes, instead of finding the expected happiness, they encounter only pain, deep disillusionment, or even death. In the pursuit of dreams and overarching goals, it is crucial to remain aware of the people around us. The story of a young Guatemalan woman named Nancy Paola Reyes Gores has become one of the most resonant cases in Spain in recent years. The mother of two left Central America to cross the ocean in search of employment that could provide her daughters with a decent life and assist her elderly parents. However, the woman never returned home. Fragments of her disfigured and unrecognizable body were found with difficulty in desolate and nearly impassable areas. At the time of her crime, she was 4 months pregnant, and the perpetrator was someone Gores had hoped to share her life with. Challenging life in Guatemala, little is known about the early years of the woman named Nancy Paola Reyes Gores. She was born on April 13, 1991, in a small village named Granados in the Republic of Guatemala. Nancy was the second of 5 children in a very poor family. Her parents, Jorge and Prudencia Gores, struggled to make ends meet. Despite this, they did everything possible to ensure their children received a good education and could live better than they did. After finishing school, Nancy was able to enroll at the university in the city of Villanueva, where she studied business administration and document management. She was a diligent student and graduated with honors. However, despite her academic achievements, significant career prospects did not follow. She worked as a cashier in a large supermarket during her studies and later was promoted to administrator, but her career progression stalled there. During her university years, Nancy lived in an unregistered marriage with a young man whose name is not mentioned in public records, with whom she had 2 daughters. Unfortunately, this relationship did not lead to a long-term commitment, and the couple separated. The father of the girls subsequently lost interest in the fate of his children and did not provide any financial support. Decision to relocate. Nancy continued to live in her parents' house, now with her own daughters, working at the supermarket and seeing no future prospects. The family barely had enough money for essentials, and something had to change. In 2013, Nancy's older sister emigrated to the United States, where she soon found a good job, married successfully, and settled well. Inspired by her sister, Nancy decided to radically change her life too, but she chose to relocate to Europe, settling on sunny Spain. At that time, she didn't even have enough money to buy a one-way plane ticket, let alone funds needed for initial expenses. For several years, Gores worked diligently, saving enough money to finally make her dream come true in the summer of 2018. In July, she bought a ticket to Madrid and promised her parents that she would keep in constant contact so they wouldn't worry about her. She planned to find housing and a job upon arrival. She carried a few €1,000, enough to rent a room, cover food, and the most necessary items until she could secure a steady income. At the time of her departure, Nancy was 27 years old, and her daughters, who stayed with their grandparents in Guatemala, were 7 and 5 years old. Nancy didn't stay long in Madrid. After living in Barcelona for some time, she moved to the city of Ciudad Real, the center of the Spanish province of the same name. She called home almost daily, asking about her family's well-being, and she regularly sent money home, which increasingly helped her parents not only fully support themselves and her daughters, but also to renovate their old house. Nancy mentioned she didn't have an official stable job and was making ends meet through odd jobs, like cleaning in affluent homes or caring for the elderly and sick. Nancy never complained about the hardships. On the contrary, she told her family that Europe offered more opportunities, and she could never have earned as much back home, even working around the clock with no days off. It seemed she was completely satisfied with how her life was unfolding, and even spoke of eventually bringing her daughters to Spain once she saved enough to rent a spacious and comfortable home for the whole family. A fateful romance. For a while, Nancy didn't share much about her personal life, claiming she simply had no time due to work. But in the spring of 2020, she admitted to her parents that she had met a man with whom she had started a romantic relationship. His name was Carlos Andres Bustamante, and they had met by chance while Gores was looking for new rental housing. As they resolved this issue, the couple grew closer and eventually started living together. Carlos was a year older than his beloved and, at the start of their relationship, did not have a steady income, surviving on random small jobs. In fact, Nancy was the main breadwinner in their relationship. She paid for housing and bills and often gave Carlos money for his personal needs and expenses. However, she never complained to her family about this, so her parents were confident that everything was fine, and their daughter had met a good man with whom she lived in love, harmony, and abundance. By that time, Nancy's 2 younger brothers had also moved to Spain, with whom she kept in touch. She was particularly close to Dennis, the youngest brother, who had even met Carlos personally and found him likable. At the end of June 2020, Nancy and Carlos decided to move to the resort city of Santander, located on the Atlantic coast. In a phone conversation with her family, Nancy mentioned that the climate was warmer and better there, and she saw more job prospects. However, at that time, certain difficulties began to appear in her relationship with Carlos, which she tried not to discuss with anyone. Bustamante turned out to be jealous, temperamental, and quite cruel. Moreover, he lacked any career ambitions and was completely satisfied being supported by a woman. Most alarmingly, he abused alcohol and occasionally indulged in forbidden substances, although he constantly tearfully promised to quit and find a stable job. Gores was openly doubting whether to continue her life with this man when she discovered she was pregnant. Carlos was thrilled by this news and swore that from now on, their life would change for the better, but in reality, things only got worse. He continued to drink and use drugs, taking money from his civil wife or asking his mother for it. Moreover, he began to physically abuse Nancy, something she tried to keep from everyone. Alarming signals. On the evening of August 12th, while Nancy was video chatting with her parents, they suddenly heard Carlos loudly shouting and berating their daughter, demanding to know who she was talking to. He didn't believe her when she said she was speaking with her mother and snatched the phone from her hands. After verifying the truth by looking at the screen, he simply threw the device onto a chair and walked away. The next day, the situation repeated itself. Carlos again grabbed the phone from Nancy's hands while she was talking to her parents and daughters. He demanded to see who she was speaking with, insulted her, and even threatened harm. A frightened Nancy later explained to her relatives that her partner was just overly jealous and tried to reassure them that everything was fine. Her parents, however, tried to persuade her to contact the police, but she insisted that she could handle the situation herself. However, on August 17th, during a candid phone conversation with her sister, Gores ominously stated that if anything happened to her, or if she suddenly died, Carlos would be solely to blame. Her words were chilling, but she did not elaborate further, only asking her sister to take care of her children if needed. This was the last time her sister heard Nancy's voice. Mysterious disappearance of the pregnant woman. On August 20th, around 2 p.m, Nancy sent a text message to her father, promising to call later that evening, but she never did, nor the next day, which was unusual for her. She also did not respond to calls from her family, prompting them to try contacting Carlos, but he did not answer his phone either. Since the couple had recently moved to Santander and had no friends there, and Nancy's brothers were on the other side of the country and couldn't quickly arrive to check on her, the situation was alarming. A few days later, a strange message came from Carlos's phone stating that he and Nancy had argued and decided to split up. Allegedly, she had packed her things and left in search of a separate apartment, was ignoring his calls, and he had no idea where she might be. Her brothers then suggested that Carlos should immediately come to Ciudad Real so they could go to the police together and file a missing person report. Carlos readily agreed, but as expected, he never showed up, did not file the report, and on top of everything else, he too stopped communicating with the Gores family. Mother knew everything. The relatives of the missing woman themselves contacted the police to report her disappearance. Meanwhile, through Nancy's friends, her brothers found the address of Sandra Bustamante, Carlos's mother. When they visited her, introduced themselves, and explained the situation, she unexpectedly broke down in tears, confessing that she had suspected her son could do something terrible to his partner, but she did not elaborate on the details. Sandra also had no idea where her son and future daughter-in-law were. Carlos wasn't answering her calls but only sent brief messages, asking her not to ask questions and to give him some time. She liked Nancy, but knew her son too well and understood what he was capable of. The next day, Sandra was called in for questioning at the police station. Law enforcement wanted to discuss the disappearance of her would-be daughter-in-law and to find out the possible whereabouts of Carlos. She shared with the officers what she had already told the girls' brothers the day before and showed them a lengthy text message that Nancy had sent her a couple of days before she vanished. In the message, Nancy pleaded with Sandra never to give her son money, regardless of the tearful stories he might concoct. According to Gores, he would spend it all on alcohol and banned substances, under the influence of which he became very aggressive and cruel. He had no desire to find a job or battle his addictions, and his behavior became increasingly threatening, prompting the pregnant woman to consider leaving him. She ended her message by saying it was better to end things now before anyone got hurt. Another disturbing detail also came to light. It turned out that Carlos had several prior convictions for causing bodily harm, and one of his first victims had been his own mother, whom he had brutally beaten when he was just a 17-year-old teenager. At that time, he had gotten off with probation, but later, after leaving his family home, he had served short terms for assaulting women with whom he lived and tried to form relationships. The oldest profession. The investigation was just beginning, but in the first few days, many curious details emerged that indicated this union was doomed from the start. In addition to Carlos being an aggressive, unemployed drug addict with a criminal record and suffering from uncontrollable bouts of rage, friends of Nancy revealed something interesting about her as well. It turned out that the woman was not merely a housekeeper or caregiver, as she had told her parents, because cleaning houses and caring for the elderly would never have brought in as much money as she was sending home every month. The slender, dark-haired Guatemalan with a striking appearance provided escort services to wealthy Spaniards and visitors alike. Indeed, her work was connected to the odd and sudden move to the resort port city of Santander, where she had more opportunities to earn. Carlos knew about his beloved's occupation, and initially he was fine with it since she fully supported them both, eliminating the need for him to find work himself. However, when she became pregnant, he began to lose his mind. Firstly, he was tormented by doubts about whether he was the father of the child, suspecting it might be one of Nancy's clients. Secondly, she continued to work even in her condition, and Bustamante was insanely jealous. He alternated between forbidding her to meet and talk with other men and forcing her to work when they ran out of money to live on. The money that the man took from his mother, he spent exclusively on himself and his vices. Horrific discoveries. In a rented apartment, for nearly a week, there had been no known whereabouts of Nancy and Carlos. Carlos had been in touch but only responded with messages and never disclosed his location. Surprisingly, it wasn't until August 26th that police finally obtained a warrant to search the couple's vacant rental apartment in Santander. What they found there was truly shocking and left no doubt that Nancy was no longer alive. Blood traces were found virtually everywhere in the apartment. Some attempts had been made to clean them up, but for the most part, they were visible even to the naked eye. In the clogged drains of the bathroom and toilet, fragments of bones, hair, as well as pieces of skin and internal organs were discovered. Forensic analysis confirmed that all belonged to the missing woman, although her remains were not found in the apartment. The crime scene suggested that Nancy had been brutally ended, dismembered in the bathroom, and her remains disposed of elsewhere. Carlos immediately became the prime suspect in the case. He remained unreachable, and his whereabouts were unknown. Also found in the apartment was a package from a small hatchet purchased at a local hardware store. The tool itself was not found, but Carlos Bustamante's clear fingerprints were on the package. Security footage from that store showed that on August 20th, Carlos bought the hatchet, a pair of sturdy rubber gloves, and large trash bags. At a market near their home, he purchased a small cart from an elderly vendor, who immediately recognized the suspect from a photo shown to him. Arrest and search for the body. The day after the grim discoveries in the apartment, an unsuspecting Carlos unexpectedly turned himself in at a police station in Madrid. Trying to deflect suspicion from himself, he went to report Nancy missing, but was immediately arrested as the main suspect in the gruesome crime. Carlos claimed he had nothing to do with what happened, stating they had argued and parted ways on August 20th. He said he left town in a fit of emotion and was unaware of any subsequent events involving Nancy. He suggested that someone might have attacked her when she returned to the apartment to gather her belongings. Carlos's version sounded far-fetched, especially after police found his fingerprints on the hatchet's packaging. In the following days, nearby wastelands, sewer systems, and the coastline were thoroughly searched with the help of divers, but no trace of Nancy was found. The police then decided to track all of Carlos's movements from August 20th to the 26th, using his mobile phone signals. It turned out he had spent 3 days traveling along the coast and had also visited the cities of Bilbao and Burgos before heading to Madrid. It was clear that Carlos was trying to cover his tracks, but it seemed unlikely that he would travel around the country with a dismembered body, leading authorities to continue their search in Santander. Street surveillance footage showed that on the evening of August 20th, he walked toward a large natural forest park. He returned to the apartment late at night and then went out again, this time with a cart filled with oddly shaped bags. There were few cameras in the park itself, so once Carlos entered the wooded area, he disappeared and later reappeared with the same cart, which was now much lighter. He then headed toward the railway tracks, beyond which was a steep cliff overgrown with bushes. From there, he returned much lighter, giving law enforcement a clear indication of where to look for the body. Where is the child? It wasn't until September 16th that bags containing highly decomposed human remains were found in thick underbrush on the hillside. These remains were identified as those of the missing Nancy Gores, divided into 20 parts with a hatchet. According to security camera footage, everything Carlos transported in the cart was recovered, but something was still missing. Nancy, as we recall, was 4 months pregnant, yet her fetus was not found in any of the bags. The condition of the victim's genitals and lower abdomen showed merciless mutilation with a knife and hatchet, indicating that the perpetrator likely extracted the fetus and disposed of it separately from the mother's body. Carlos consistently denied his involvement, gave conflicting statements, and continued to try to shift the blame onto an unknown assailant. However, traces of the victim's blood were found on his clothing and shoes, which he attempted but failed to completely wash off. Despite Bustamante's refusal to admit guilt, investigators were able to piece together the chain of tragic events and the full scenario of the crime. Forensic experts believe that on the afternoon of August 20th, following an argument, the man brutally beat and strangled his pregnant partner in the kitchen, where traces of blood were found on the floor and walls. Carlos then moved Nancy's body to the bathroom and went shopping at a hardware store and the market. In the bathroom, he divided Nancy's body into 20 parts using a hatchet and a large kitchen knife, placed the pieces into bags, and loaded everything into a cart. He then went to the park, looking for secluded places to dispose of the body. Late at night, he left the apartment with the cart and followed a pre-planned route deep into the park, scattering the bags in various locations, hoping they would never be found. Trial and sentence. The whereabouts of the fetus Carlos removed from Nancy's body remain unknown. He denied his guilt and claimed he loved her. From the time of the gruesome crime until his arrest in Madrid, Bustamante lived off the money he stole from Gores, which he spent daily in bars across various cities. The investigation, the search for evidence and witnesses took law enforcement nearly 2 years, and the trial of the murderer did not begin until July 2022. In November of the same year, Carlos was found guilty of the premeditated brutal murder of Nancy and her unborn child, as well as the dismemberment and desecration of her body. However, many considered the sentence handed down to the murderer to be too lenient. Bustamante was sentenced to 25.5 years in prison, and he was also ordered to pay financial compensation of 150,000 euros to the parents and daughters of the deceased woman. Inevitability. When one person goes missing, it's always a tragedy for their family. But imagine the horror that befalls the loved ones if an entire family disappears. And if there are children involved, the grief is indescribable. Matters concerning the life and health of children are always perceived with a special sensitivity. They are innocent from birth. Unfortunately, there are times when these little angels suffer and bear responsibilities just as adults do. A complicated situation unfolded in the fall of 2013 in Deltona, Florida, USA, involving the family of Yesenia Suarez and Luis Toledo. The 28-year-old mother vanished along with her children, 9-year-old Thalia and 8-year-old Michael Otto. Law enforcement officers began the search and investigation into the disappearance immediately. However, the clues discovered soon left the seasoned officers astonished. What happened overnight from October 22nd to October 23rd is shrouded in mystery and defies all logic. Disappearance. The next morning, Felicita Perez, the mother of the main character, waited for her usual call. Yesenia called her every day between 8:30 and 9 a.m., but this time there was no call. The elderly woman grew concerned, as such behavior was out of character for her daughter. Over the next 2 hours, she tried to make contact, but all attempts were futile. The mobile phone of the person being called was turned off. Felicita then called the school where her grandchildren attended. However, the administration informed her that the children had not arrived for classes. The mother's concern grew. Around 11 a.m., she decided to visit Yesenia's home, but nobody answered the door. After this, the worried woman sought help from the police. The compelling arguments she presented convinced the officers to respond to the message. Upon arriving at Yesenia's residence, police officers began inspecting the house and the surrounding area. Soon after, 35-year-old Luis, the husband of the missing woman, arrived. He seemed surprised to find law enforcement at his home and initially expressed indignation. However, once he learned the reasons for their presence, he softened. During the conversation, the man mentioned that he last saw his wife and children the night before. After a minor argument, she packed some belongings and left, saying nothing to him. The family was on the verge of divorce, so after another quarrel, he spent the night in the car. By morning, the house was empty. Toledo stated that he was deeply saddened that after years together, his wife did not even bother to say goodbye. His words were credible. He also gave permission for a search. Inside the home, except for scattered children's toys, everything was orderly. No signs of forced entry or struggle were detected. It seemed quite possible that the young woman left at the first opportunity along with her children. Also missing were her second car, a 2013 Honda Accord, as well as her personal items, documents, and mobile phone. Nevertheless, there were elements that raised concerns. Firstly, Suarez was very close to her relatives. Therefore, she would not have kept them in the dark and would have informed them of her plans or current whereabouts. Secondly, a peculiar smell lingered in the house, especially strong in the bedroom, bathroom, and the hallway leading from it. At places, the smell of cleaning products mixed with the scent of vinegar. This led detectives to two conclusions. Either the homeowners were exceptionally clean, or someone was attempting to destroy evidence of a crime that had occurred there. Thirdly, Felicita's account raised suspicions. She had previously told the police that on October 22nd, a terrible argument occurred between Yesenia and Luis, during which he showed aggression and struck her daughter. Finally, neighbors of the couple, who had gathered at the arrival of the police, reported strange noises coming from the house under investigation. Witnesses explained that they heard something resembling a scream around 2 a.m., but did not attach any significance to it. Altercations among teenagers in this area were not uncommon. Therefore, only when law enforcement arrived did they realize that something extraordinary had happened. On the brink of collapse, subsequent investigations shed light on the details of the argument mentioned by the mother of the missing woman and her children. Luis suspected his wife of infidelity and had installed a tracking program on her phone. This led him to discover an affair between Yesenia and her colleague, Kevin Dren. On October 22nd, the distraught husband confronted his wife at her workplace, publicly accused her of infidelity, and slapped her. He then declared he would not hinder the lovers further. During the conflict, one of the organization's employees called emergency services to report the incident. However, Toledo left the building before the police arrived. The officers interviewed Suarez, who admitted that she often experienced such uncontrollable behavior from her husband, but had never sought help. Her statements were documented and recorded. After work, Yesenia visited her mother's house, where her children were waiting. They had dinner together, after which Toledo called her. Felicita recounted hearing about their conversation. Luis apologized and pleaded not to press charges against him. He also warned that something unpleasant might happen if she did not comply with his demands. It turns out the protagonist of the story had decided to obtain a restraining order against her husband. But after the call, she changed her mind, explaining to her family that it would only make things worse. Late in the evening, Toledo came to his mother-in-law's house and spoke with the women. He was distraught, complaining that his marriage was falling apart. He expressed his love for his family and his desire not to lose them. Yesenia, however, was determined and declared that a divorce was imminent. After this, he left. To give him time to cool off and come to terms with the new reality, the woman initially decided to stay overnight at her parental home. Nevertheless, after meeting with her husband, she took the children and returned home. Unfortunately, this was the last time the mother saw her daughter and grandchildren. Arrest. Due to the incident at Suarez's office the day before and her subsequent disappearance, the police had solid grounds to arrest Luis. The man was shocked and appeared bewildered. At the station, he reiterated his version of the events that happened overnight. After arguing with his wife at her mother's house, he went to a neighbor's place, where he stayed until 1 a.m. He then decided to spend the night in his car to avoid further conflict. At 7 a.m., he returned home and found that no one was there. Despite this, the suspect remained calm and did not express any concern for the missing individuals. He explained this by his confidence that they would soon return or make contact. He claimed Yesenia was not the kind of person who kept others regularly informed, and the current situation was just a foolish coincidence. A love story. Yesenia and Luis met in 2009 during a street festival. They were immediately attracted to each other and quickly fell in love. However, their relationship was anything but harmonious. Everyone around them was convinced that the two were not suited for each other. Suarez had been through a failed marriage before. At 24, she found herself a single mother of 2 young children. Thus, she was determined to set up their lives in the most favorable way possible. She dreamed of providing them with a good education and a better future. To this end, she re-enrolled in college and took up a full-time job. Yesenia worked for an American K-9 detection service in Lake Mary, a company known for training dogs to work with military and police forces. Luis, in contrast to his partner, was older and just beginning to sort out his life. He had been convicted multiple times in the past and was a former member of the Latin Kings gang. Thanks to his disposition and well-honed fighting skills, he had once held a leading position within the group. However, after turning state's evidence and betraying his peers, he lost his former influence and respect. Therefore, Toledo left the gang, turned away from his criminal past, and enrolled in college for barber training. He even got baptized and started attending church. Luis emerged as a sociable and caring person who tried to help everyone. After meeting Yesenia, he transformed completely. He became a loving and tender partner to her and a caring stepfather to her children. All the neighbors spoke highly of him. They often saw him spending time with his family and playing with the kids in the yard. The young couple got married on the first day of 2011. Although their relationship was initially happy, over time everything changed. Respect and understanding faded away. Luis began to spend a lot of time on video games and neglected his family duties. It seemed all his attention had shifted to the virtual world. His wife repeatedly expressed her grievances, but the situation would only improve temporarily. Felicita often visited the couple since she lived just a few blocks away. Therefore, she was well aware of everything happening in her daughter's life. Gradually, the number of arguments in the family increased. Toledo genuinely did not understand what was expected of him and why they couldn't live as before. One day, he became so angry that he physically lashed out at his wife. After this, their marriage began to crumble. Eyewitnesses. After Luis was detained, detectives began interviewing relatives and acquaintances of the missing family. They also contacted Yesenia's lover, Kevin. He reported that he had spoken with her late on the evening of October 22nd. He called to check on her, concerned that she might be in trouble after the incident at work. During the conversation, Suarez seemed tense, but she assured him that everything was fine and that it would just take some time to settle down. Sometimes her voice sounded unclear, which made him think that she might have had a drink. Their conversation lasted about 5 minutes. At the end, Yesenia wished him a good night and said goodbye. It was clear that Kevin did not know where she was and was genuinely worried that something irreparable might have happened to her. Later, a call came into the police station from Jackson Titian, a neighbor of the suspect. The young man lived with his mother across the street and had inadvertently witnessed the events unfold. He reported that at 6 a.m., Louise came to him asking for help with a task. He needed to pick up a neighbor on his way back from Lake Mary, but he did not explain why. Meanwhile, Toledo got into Yesenia's car, leading the student to assume that her vehicle needed repair and they were heading to a garage. However, the reality was different from what he had imagined. They drove for about 30 minutes and then stopped in the parking lot of a large supermarket. Luis got out and started cleaning the interior of the car. Jackson noticed how thoroughly he wiped down the cabin, all the doors and windows, using a cleaning agent. Afterwards, he put the car mats, a rag, and gloves into a bag and then disposed of the bundle in a trash container. At that moment, the eyewitness did not understand what was happening and felt mixed emotions. He began to suspect that something serious had occurred the night before. Yet, on the other hand, if Toledo was hiding something, why would he take him along? After leaving Yesenia's vehicle, the men headed back. This time, Louise drove while Tishon was sent to the back seat. The ride back to Delton was silent. Unable to bear the tension, Jackson finally asked what had happened. The neighbor simply replied that he had lost his temper and refused to explain further. The incident occupied the 20-year-old student's mind all morning, but after hearing rumors about the family's disappearance, he pieced together the events and immediately called the police. Later, the young man was questioned in the office and confirmed everything he had said on the phone. He then directed law enforcement officers to the location of the sought-after vehicle and the container where Luis had discarded the items. Armed with Jackson's testimony, detectives summoned Toledo. Everyone hoped to see Yesenia and her children alive, so they hoped the alleged criminal would confess sooner rather than later. Therefore, they informed him of everything the neighbor had reported and asked him to comment on these statements. However, the suspect suggested that the law enforcement officers were bluffing and refused to engage in conversation. Investigation. Detectives knew that solid evidence was needed for substantial accusations, so they didn't rush things and instead headed to the parking lot. The sought-after car was indeed there, but it was empty. However, Yesenia's personal belongings were found inside: her purse, Idaho card, wallet, work pass, and mobile phone. Forensic experts examined the vehicle for DNA, blood, or fingerprints, but were unable to find anything conclusive. The experts stated that this was because the car had been cleaned thoroughly. Later, it was discovered that the garage keys still bore a single fingerprint, which turned out to be the suspect's. In the trash bin that Tishon had pointed out, they found a bag containing cleaning supplies, a rag, and some clothing. Additionally, bloodstains were found on the discarded mats and men's shoes. A wet shower curtain and the same cleaning products were then found in a container near the couple's home. When the house was thoroughly inspected, it was difficult to find any traces. However, experts were able to find a few stains in the bathroom. Blood spatters were found on the cabinet doors and on the floor under the bathtub. DNA analysis determined that they belonged to Talia and Michael. After this discovery, the lead detective expressed doubt that the missing persons would be found alive. Nevertheless, the search continued. The operation involved relatives and acquaintances of Yesenia, as well as numerous volunteers. They searched everywhere, using dogs and divers, but to no avail. It became obvious that the only person who could give any information was Luis, but he continued to remain silent. Confession. Eventually, during the third interrogation, Toledo cracked and confessed to Yesenia's death. However, he continued to deny that he had harmed the children. He recounted that Jackson Tishon had come over to his house in the evening to play video games. Suddenly, his wife and children appeared on the doorstep. She no longer liked his games and was even more upset by the events of the day, so she demanded that they leave. But when Luis refused, Yesenia walked up to him and started shaking him by the shoulders. To make her stop, he punched her in the neck. Unfortunately, he didn't calculate the force and the blow proved fatal. She couldn't breathe. I could see her gasping for breath and I couldn't do anything to help. She ended up dying looking at me. The suspect finished his story. The detective then provocatively asked, "Do you miss your children? Would you trade places with them?" Toledo nodded silently. The investigator then asked him to explain how they died. The suspect's behavior changed, and he stated that they were massacred by a neighbor who was present. After Yesenia's death, Talia and Michael ran into the room. They saw their mother lying on the floor and began screaming. Luis therefore asked Jackson to take them to another place. However, he soon heard loud noises and followed them into the bathroom. When he looked inside, he saw that they were lying on the floor and the neighbor was holding an axe. Luis burst into tears. The man added that after the incident, he was in shock and lost all self-awareness, and Jackson took advantage of the situation and got rid of the bodies. There was silence in the interrogation room. The last hope of finding the missing alive was gone. All that remained was to find the bodies, but the likelihood of finding them was rapidly diminishing. The detectives doubted the man's sincerity. Nevertheless, his claims had to be verified, so Jackson Tycon was questioned again. He was immediately told the neighbor's version of events. The young man stated that after returning home from college, he never went out again. He also noted that he had no reason to end the lives of Yesenia or Michael and Talia. Moreover, he personally went to the police and reported the incident. Soon his alibi was confirmed. He was cleared of suspicion and released home. The desire to end it all. The search for Yesenia, Michael, and Talia continued relentlessly. Despite considerable public attention and the large number of people involved, the efforts were unsuccessful. Every neighborhood was combed, including woods, bodies of water, and local landfills, all to no avail. Detectives feared that without the bodies, there might not be enough evidence to convict. However, something unexpected soon happened. During one of the routine interrogations, Toledo asked to use the restroom. Accompanied by several officers, since the restroom was at the other end of the building, they had to walk a short distance. During this walk, the detainee asked for a favor. He wanted to be taken home so that he could end his life. Understandably, he was not released. Instead, Luis asked the officers to remove his handcuffs so they could shoot him as if he were trying to escape. This bizarre request was also ignored. In response, one of the officers asked where his family's bodies were. Toledo muttered that he would never reveal that information. When the detainee entered the restroom, he managed to close the door behind him. Soon, there was the sound of breaking glass. It turned out that the suspect had broken the mirror over the sink and used the shards to slash his wrists. He was clearly determined to end his life and was doing everything he could to do so, but it was unclear what was driving him. Was it guilt and remorse for what had happened, or fear of the punishment awaiting him? Later, he did give an explanation for his actions. The policeman broke down the door and pulled out the bloody man, whose devious plan had failed. He received timely medical attention, and his life was not threatened. However, the detainee's behavior revealed much. It turned out that he feared retaliation from his former colleagues, who traditionally had an unkind attitude toward those who harmed children, unlike their attitude toward unfaithful spouses. Luis realized that if he ended up in prison, he was in for a rough ride. His past convictions when he turned in the Latin Kings leaders and the new murder charges would weigh heavily against him. This was confirmed by the contents of his letters sent during the investigation. In one of them, he expressed his desire to tell the whole truth, but could not, as it would be used against him. He reminded everyone that Yesenia had been unfaithful to him, and added that he would never harm the children in any way. "I love them more than anything and continue to love them to this day," he wrote. On October 28, Luis was charged with Yesenia's murder, and the following January, with the murders of Michael and Talia. The prosecution did not rule out that a third person was involved in the crime and helped the accused dispose of the bodies. Given his past criminal experience, Toledo also knew how to clean up a crime scene professionally on his own. Justice has been served. The trial of the man took place in 2017. The prosecutor argued that the accused committed the crime out of jealousy. However, he did not confess to ending the lives of Talia and Michael, since there was no justification for such actions. Therefore, Luis came up with an absurd story involving a neighbor. Kimberly LaSanta, Toledo's sister-in-law, testified in favor of the prosecution. She told the court that because of numerous threats from him, she obtained a restraining order against him. She claimed that Luis had previously sent her text messages threatening to take the children and send someone to harm her. At trial, she testified to her constant fear of him and produced the saved text messages. The defense, on the other hand, attempted to incriminate Jackson Tycon, resulting in a lie detector test and searches of his home and car, though nothing incriminating was found. That day, Jackson was indeed troubled by Luis's erratic behavior. Luis looked tense and scared, but Jackson didn't bother to get to the bottom of it because he couldn't imagine the horrible events that had transpired. Felicita and the children's biological father attended the trial. Relatives of the victims seemed overwhelmed with grief and were almost ready to confront Toledo in the courtroom. After 7 hours of deliberation, the jury found the defendant guilty of second-degree murder in the case of Yesenia and first-degree murder in the case of Talia and Michael. Luis was sentenced to 3 life terms without the possibility of parole. Interestingly, he initially asked for the death penalty, explaining that death row inmates do not face other inmates, and therefore he would not face retaliation from former gang members with whom he was once associated. The defendant knew that there was a bounty on his head and that he would suffer for the rest of his life. Everyone but the defense was convinced that Toledo had no remorse for his actions, but was simply afraid of what awaited him after the trial. The relatives of the victims were satisfied with the verdict. Outcomes. It is known that Yesenia and her children were active members of the Spanish-speaking Seventh-day Adventist church community in Deltona. The mother was studying at Rollins College in Winter Park, Florida. In spring 2014, she was expected to graduate with honors with a bachelor's degree in human resources management. After her disappearance, the college posthumously awarded her the degree. As of April 2024, the convicted Toledo continues to serve his sentence. He claims that he did not interrupt Talia and Michael's lives and does not know the whereabouts of their bodies. In one of the letters written from prison, he appears to have coded the message, writing that he sent 3 boxes, 1 large and 2 small ones. The large package reached its destination and the 2 small ones were fine. He added that he cared about what happens to him next, but he was innocent of the charges against him. Perhaps in this way, he wanted to let his acquaintances know that his conscience was clear and he should not be punished. Nevertheless, the evidence was against him. Even the fact that he had previously served 4 years for burglary, robbery, and kidnapping spoke volumes. It is possible that he did lose control of himself and committed inexplicable acts. Experience shows that those who embark on a criminal path rarely get off it. Breaking off relationships almost always leaves emotional scars and turmoil which do not heal quickly. People handle such situations differently. Some prefer to never see or speak to each other again to avoid reopening fresh wounds, while others remain friends. However, there are instances where ex-lovers are no longer together, but also unable to completely separate due to something shared that cannot be quickly dissolved. In situations where former lovers start new relationships in each other's presence and continue to interact, it can lead to unpredictable outcomes. The story of Ildiko Krajak, a successful entrepreneur and owner of a high-end spa salon in California, resembled a fairy tale but ended abruptly and tragically. Initially, there were suggestions of an accident, an attack, or rival machinations, but the truth turned out to be far grimmer. A devastating event befell the successful and attractive woman at the hands of someone she once loved and trusted immensely. Who is Ildiko Krajak? Childhood, early years. A girl named Ildiko Krajak was born on June 8, 1969, in the city of Miskolc in northeastern Hungary, and was the younger of 2 children in a middle-class family. Her mother, Juliana, worked as a nurse in the Department of Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery, but later, in the 1980s, retrained in aesthetic medicine, which was becoming increasingly popular, and opened her own clinic. The family patriarch, Laszlo Krajak, was a simple worker and spent most of his life laboring at a local factory, striving to provide for his family. Ildiko's elder brother, named after their father, was only a few years older than her. From early childhood, the siblings got along well and were nearly inseparable. Following in their father's footsteps, her brother gained an engineering degree and worked at the same machine-building plant for a while, before starting his own small business in their hometown. Ildiko was naturally creative and imaginative from childhood, feeling constrained not only in Miskolc, but also in conservative Hungary. She dreamed of traveling the world, seeing other cities and countries, establishing her business, achieving success and recognition, and breaking free from the ordinariness in which her family lived. After finishing school, young Krajak enrolled in a medical college and later obtained a license to work in aesthetic cosmetology. Inspired by her mother's example, she aimed to achieve more and become a true star in her field. Her first success came when she was just 20 years old. The budding specialist skillfully built her career, independently developing a business plan and strategy. She quickly built up a client base and started earning decent money by her city's standards. Ildiko constantly strived to learn and improve her skills, staying up to date with all the latest innovations in cosmetology, aesthetic medicine, and the beauty industry at large. However, she understood that her opportunities at home were limited and that, as a specialist, she would soon reach their ceiling. To move forward, she would need to find a place that offered more chances to fully realize her potential. After earning a bachelor's degree in medical aesthetics, the ambitious young Krajak decided to take action. Moving to the USA, the ambitions of this young woman were enviable, though few believed she would truly embark on such radical changes, as Ildiko was very close to her family and seemed unlikely to ever leave her parents. However, in the summer of 1992, shortly after celebrating her 23rd birthday, Ildiko decided to realize her lifelong dream and moved across the ocean to the United States of America. Chasing the American dream, the determined Hungarian gambled everything and took the risk. It was not just a move, but a desire to completely change her life. She gathered all the money she had saved, bought a one-way plane ticket, and set off for another continent. There, she had no relatives, no friends, nor acquaintances. Nobody was waiting for her, and she barely knew any English. But she took that step into the unknown. Her parents had mixed feelings about their daughter's decision, but no one tried to stop her since she was already an adult and could make such serious decisions independently. Nevertheless, her relatives were very concerned about how her life would unfold in a foreign land. Ildiko decided to head straight to sunny California, where she planned to look for a job, learn the language, and, so to speak, put down roots. The move was a real culture shock for her. After living in conservative, prim, and cold Hungary, America indeed seemed like a fairy tale, and a place where all dreams come true. Initially, the young woman stayed in a budget hostel, trying to save money since she still had to find a job, which was not easy without knowing the language. However, luck soon smiled on her, and she was hired as an assistant to a master stylist in one of the local beauty salons. The salary allowed her to rent a decent apartment and provide for her basic needs, but to work in the field of cosmetology and aesthetic medicine, Krajak needed to master the language well and obtain the appropriate medical license in the U.S. With no connections or acquaintances, Ildiko could only rely on her own strength. She worked diligently, dedicating all her free time to learning English and improving her communication skills. Her perseverance and hard work soon paid off. She successfully passed the required exams and obtained a license allowing her to work in cosmetology, leading specialist. Just a couple of years after moving, Ildiko became the leading specialist at a spa center in an elite 5-star hotel frequented by show business stars and other celebrities. She earned a reputation as the best cosmetologist in town, with bookings made months in advance. Additionally, as a professional, she constantly educated herself and advanced her qualifications. She attended international exhibitions and seminars, had an excellent understanding of the compositions of cosmetic products and treatments, and easily helped clients resolve almost any aesthetic skin issues. Beyond her professional skills, the young woman possessed superb diplomatic qualities. She easily and effortlessly made useful contacts and influential friends, quickly established relationships with business partners, and had a natural business acumen. Krajak was not content to always work for others and dreamed of opening her own salon, which would be the best not only in the city, but throughout the state of California. By the mid-90s, the young Hungarian had become the most sought-after specialist at the center where she worked. Clients who had once visited her for treatment subsequently tried to book appointments only with this cosmetologist. Ildiko already understood that the client base she had built would stay with her, even if she changed her place of work. The management of the spa complex knew this too, and therefore did everything possible to retain the specialist by creating the most favorable working conditions. Family life. Krajak was open, friendly, sociable, and very beautiful, naturally attracting a lot of male attention and having many admirers. However, during her first years in the United States, she was more focused on learning the language, professional growth, and career advancement. pushing her personal life to not just a back burner, but perhaps to the fifth priority. In 1995, she met a young man named Ramilo Vestal who had Asian roots and had immigrated to America with his family as a schoolboy. He had pursued a medical education and was working as a doctor at a local hospital. The couple quickly found a common language, and romantic feelings developed between them. A year after meeting in the spring of 1996, they had a modest wedding attended only by their closest people. 2 years later, the couple welcomed their only child together, a son they named Keanu. The new parents adored their child, spending all their free time with family. Their home was filled with love and understanding, and everyone who knew them noted how harmoniously they complemented each other and how they radiated happiness when together. In the mid-90s, Ildiko convinced her cousin to also move to the United States, and she decided to relocate with her husband and children. The relatives settled near her home. They communicated closely, regularly visited each other, and their families became close friends. In 2000, after a long illness, Krajniak's father passed away, which was a severe blow to the family. By that time, her elder brother Laszlo was already married, raising children and living in another city, leaving their mother Juliana alone in the family home, suffering from severe depression. Additionally, she began showing signs of dementia, making it unsafe to leave her alone. Ildiko decided to bring her mother to California so that the elderly woman wouldn't feel lonely and could spend her final years surrounded by family. For Juliana, moving to America was also a challenging step, but her daughter helped her adapt, surrounding her with love and care. Moreover, the grandmother was overjoyed to have the chance to dote on her grandson Keanu, whom she had previously only seen in photographs. Own business. In 2002, Krajak finally decided to open her own salon. By then, she had accumulated enough funds, gained business experience, and built an extensive client base. Supported by her loved ones, the young woman dared to risk everything. Ildiko established her spa salon in Aliso Viejo, California, located in the San Joaquin Hills of southern Orange County. She named it Magyar Kozmetika, which translates to Hungarian cosmetics. Soon, her establishment earned a 5-star rating, and its fame spread throughout the state. In her work, Ildiko used only premium quality cosmetics, treatments, and equipment. She earned a reputation as one of the best cosmetologists, and she took great pride in this. The woman skillfully managed and developed her business, and she had chosen an excellent location for her salon. Her establishment was located in a major business center in Southern California, 10 miles from the popular Laguna Beach and about 70 miles from Los Angeles. For many years, the cosmetologist successfully developed her business, with her income steadily increasing. By the late 2000s, she and her husband had bought a luxurious large house where they moved with their son and Krajniak's mother. The woman had her own driver and household assistants, could afford anything she desired, and lived the life she had always dreamed of. Moreover, it is worth noting that Ildiko herself was a living advertisement for her salon. She always looked stunning and seemed not to age at all. She also continuously enhanced her qualifications, obtained an international medical certificate, and could practice in virtually any country. Over time, the cosmetologist also began to conduct training seminars and courses for professionals in the field. For many years, Krajak engaged in her beloved work, striving to be the best. She developed business strategies, researched the market to stay competitive, found reliable suppliers, and devised advertising campaigns. And all this did not prevent her from continuing to personally see clients who sought her services specifically. For her only beloved child, the woman paid for education in an elite private school, music lessons with the best teachers, and language courses. From her experience, she knew how important it was to master several foreign languages and how useful this could be in life. In 2016, Keanu became a student at a prestigious university and went to study in Washington. Crisis and the last vacation. The year 2017 started off as an exceptionally tough one for Ildiko. The business center, which had housed her spa salon for over 15 years, suddenly changed ownership. The new owner quickly made it clear that he had his own plans for the building in a prestigious area, and thus the leases with the tenants were swiftly terminated. Ildiko was not prepared for such a turn of events and had to immediately look for a new location to relocate. For Krajak, the situation was a major stressor. She faced colossal losses and tried to find a suitable place close to the old one. She stayed in Aliso Viejo but moved from the luxurious business center to a 2-story commercial building, occupying half of the first floor. The move itself also amounted to a significant expense, as it involved transporting a large amount of expensive equipment that required careful handling. Additionally, the new location needed some cosmetic repairs before it could be operational. In March 2018, when the main work was completed and the spa salon reopened at the new location, a work-weary and stressed Ildiko decided to take a small vacation. She flew to Portugal for 2 weeks, relaxing under the warm sun at a popular beach resort. It seemed that the difficulties were behind her, and she was quick to make up for lost time. A month later, Laszlo flew to California to visit his sister and elderly mother. They communicated well, spent quality time together, and even took a family trip to Washington to surprise Keanu at university. On May 5th, Ildiko and her brother flew to their native Hungary. The man was returning home to his family, while for Ildiko, it was a business trip which he decided to combine with a visit to relatives she had not seen in a long time. She returned home with innovative treatments that provided stunning, rejuvenating effects, eager to put them to use. Unfortunately, less than a week later, the salon into which she had poured her soul was destroyed, and she herself was found dead. Accident, attack, or planned crime. On May 15, 2018, around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, the emergency services received consecutive reports of a powerful explosion and fire in the commercial center housing Ildiko's spa salon. The blast was heard several blocks away, and frightened people speculated that it could have been an attack, fearing it might be the first in a series. Across the street from the destroyed building was a daycare, and parents, upon hearing what had happened, rushed there to ensure their children were safe. Fire trucks, ambulances, and several police patrols were immediately dispatched to the scene. The building itself was partially destroyed. Flames engulfed the interior, and the street was littered with debris from bricks, glass shards, and roofing fragments. At that time, it was unclear how many people were inside at the time of the explosion and whether there were any fatalities or injuries. Witnesses reported a loud bang and acrid smoke that quickly spread through the street, triggering car alarms in the vicinity. As rescuers moved closer to the epicenter of the explosion, the scene became increasingly horrific. Blood was everywhere inside, and under the debris and broken furniture, 2 injured people were found. Later, it was discovered they were a mother and daughter who had come for treatments at the spa on that fateful day. The women were concussed, lacerated by shards, and had severe burns. They were knocked unconscious by the blast wave, but fortunately both were saved. Several other employees and clients sustained minor injuries and smoke inhalation and were taken to the hospital. But the most gruesome discovery awaited the rescuers. Behind the former reception desk, they found disfigured and severely burned human remains. Identification was not immediately possible, but it was soon confirmed to be the 48-year-old spa owner, Ildiko Krajak, who was at the epicenter. Bomb disposal units were at the scene, as there was no certainty that another explosion would not occur. From the beginning, it was difficult to determine what exactly caused such a destructive blast and what had detonated. The initial theory of a gas leak and electrical short was quickly dismissed, as there was a specific point of explosion. The possibility of a terrorist act was investigated, though no other explosive devices were found in this or neighboring buildings. Another very plausible theory was that of a carefully planned crime against Ildiko. The deceased was a kind and open person, engaged in charity work, and always willing to help others. However, she was also a successful entrepreneur with many envious rivals and competitors who might have wanted to eliminate her radically. Each theory had to be checked, but first, it was necessary to speak with the victim's relatives and friends, as well as interview the surviving witnesses. At the same time, an emergency call came from a woman named Lori Stone, who could not reach her boyfriend, Stephen Bill. According to her, he was a co-founder of the spa salon and might also have been in the building at the time of the explosion. eyewitness accounts. The surviving mother and daughter suffered serious injuries, were urgently operated on, and were in intensive care. As soon as their condition stabilized slightly, they agreed to speak with law enforcement and recount everything that happened. On that day, the women were undergoing treatments at Krajak's spa salon. They had been there before, knew the owner well, and everything was as usual during this visit until they went to the reception desk to pay for their cosmetic services. Ildiko often performed the duties of the receptionist herself and was at the desk at that moment. She was sorting through mail, and there was also a large package on the desk in front of her. She took the payment, issued the receipts to the clients, and then, continuing the casual conversation, took a box cutter and began to open that very box. At that moment, an unexpected, powerful explosion occurred, and everything after seemed like a blur. According to the daughter, she first saw a blinding flash followed by a deafening bang, then felt a wave of heat and realized she was flying through the air. In reality, she was thrown by the blast wave, but miraculously, she remained conscious, managed to find her mother amid the chaos, and dragged her to a destroyed wall for air, after which she lost consciousness and later woke up in the hospital. After speaking with the victims, there was no doubt that this was a premeditated crime, and the explosive device had been disguised as an ordinary package. The next steps were to identify a circle of suspects and determine who might not only wish the woman dead, but also carry it through. It was also unclear whether the target was solely Ildiko, or if her 59-year-old business partner Stephen Bill was also in mortal danger. Police were immediately dispatched to the man's home. Bill had just returned from a business trip and was greeted by a pile of packages at his doorstep. He was moved to a safe distance, and bomb disposal experts checked each box, but they only contained store orders, and no explosives were found. Stephen was questioned, but he appeared shocked by the news of Krajak's death and could not name anyone who might wish her harm. No longer spouses, just neighbors. The deceased's husband, Ramilo Vestil, arrived at the scene as soon as he heard about the incident. He had hoped until the last moment that his wife might have survived, but upon hearing the tragic news, he was utterly devastated. However, it was also necessary to question him. At this point, a very curious detail emerged that only a few members of the Krajak family knew. It turned out that Ildiko and Ramilo had long ceased to be a couple in the conventional sense. They continued to live in their shared, large, and luxurious house, had not formalized a divorce, and maintained a warm relationship. But in fact, they had become just neighbors to each other. In recent years, each had their own personal life. They did not feel jealousy towards one another and were ready to let go completely if either of them found true love. This circumstance seemed strange and very suspicious to the police. In the event of his wife's death, Ramilo, still being her legal spouse, would inherit the house, all the property, and the quite profitable business. However, this last aspect argued rather in favor of the man's innocence. Why would he destroy the spa salon, which was the main source of income for their family? Business partner and former lover. It was established that over the past couple of years, the deceased had been involved with at least 5 different men. Most of these were fleeting interests, but 2 names particularly drew the investigators' attention. A close friend of Krajak revealed that the woman had been seeing a man named Nicholas for a few months, to whom she felt strong emotions, and did not rule out the possibility that their relationship could progress to a new level, even potentially leading to marriage. A week before the tragedy, the couple spent a weekend together in Sacramento, where they flew spontaneously, dropping all other engagements. Detectives quickly located this man and interrogated him, but he was found to have no involvement in the tragedy and was as shocked by the events as anyone else, with no motive to harm the woman he loved. It then emerged that several months earlier, Ildiko had been closely involved with her business partner, Stephen Bill. When investigators looked into how they met and why they became partners, despite Bill having no previous ties to the beauty industry, a quite intriguing story surfaced. About a year and a half ago, when the woman faced serious business problems, was looking for a new location for the salon and was experiencing significant losses, she met Stephen. He was charmed by her beauty, fell in love at first sight, and agreed to cover all the expenses associated with moving the spa center. He also invested a substantial sum into its development, becoming Krajak's business partner. At the same time, they began a romantic relationship that lasted about 6 months. It is likely that the woman reciprocated out of gratitude, but she did not truly have deep feelings for Bill. In March 2018, they vacationed together in Portugal. But by that time, Ildiko had already started an affair with Nicholas and was constantly in touch with him by phone, which irritated Stephen. She broke up with him immediately upon returning. The former lovers continued to run the business together, and Bill did not give up trying to win her back, but she was already happy in her new relationship. He even tried to make her jealous by starting a relationship with Laurie Stone, but Krajak was unaffected by this. She no longer cared. It is likely that Bill harbored resentment towards her and could have sought revenge. Strange hobby and skeletons in the closet. The police decided to take a closer look at Stephen and discovered that he had a rather specific hobby. He was involved in making fireworks and was well versed in pyrotechnics. The man did not deny this and did not obstruct the search of his home. There, officers found professional equipment, materials for creating decorative fireworks and rockets, as well as gunpowder and other combustible chemicals. At that time, the police had no solid reason or evidence to detain Bill, and he was released. However, they decided to investigate his background further and discovered that his wife had died under strange circumstances 10 years ago. Officially, the cause of death was pancreatitis, but it was preceded by a mysterious accident at home while they were moving furniture. It appeared that Stephen had provoked the incident, but nothing could be proven. Furthermore, he received a substantial insurance payout after becoming a widower, which also suggested a motive for murder. Arrest and trial. Several months later, detectives managed to find video surveillance footage from May 10th, showing Bill purchasing a mix of combustible chemical components and parts for making poppers, which were later found at the explosion site. Additionally, it was revealed that early on the morning of the tragedy, he visited the spa salon to leave the deadly package. He entered through the back door using his key and parked his car on a nearby street to remain unnoticed. On March 3, 2019, Stephen Bill was arrested on charges of premeditated murder, use of a weapon of mass destruction, and intentional destruction of a building. During the trial, several more charges were added, related to causing serious bodily harm. One of the women injured in the explosion lost an eye, while another suffered deep burns to her face and body. Although Bill pleaded not guilty, the evidence and testimonies collected were not in his favor. Moreover, witnesses said he had never reconciled with the fact that Ildiko had left him, and he had begun to stalk her. Shortly before her death, the woman had confided to friends that she feared for her life and was concerned that her ex-lover might seek revenge. Only in early 2024 was Stephen Bill finally found guilty on all charges and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. All appeals submitted by him and his team of lawyers were rejected.